Millionaire dined at the Nanny's house and cried when he discovered what she did to impress him. Richard Thompson had never set foot in such a simple home, but there he was, sitting at the small wooden table of his children's nanny, trying to understand why he had accepted such an unusual invitation. His Italian suit clashed brutally with the modest surroundings, and he felt completely out of his element. "Mr. Richard, you've barely touched your food," said Rebecca, watching him with those concerned eyes he knew so well. "I know it's not the kind of meal you're used to, but—" "It's not that, Rebecca," he interrupted distractedly, stirring the mashed potatoes she had prepared with such care. "It's just, well, I never imagined I'd accept an invitation like this." In truth, Richard was lying to himself. There was something about this woman in her early 30s, with her simple and genuine manner, that deeply intrigued him. Over the past 6 months, since she had started caring for his 8-year-old twins, Michael and Emily, he had noticed significant changes in the children's behavior. They smiled more, fought less, and for the first time since their mother's passing 2 years ago, they seemed truly happy. "Sir, may I ask you a personal question?" Rebecca hesitated, nervously playing with the cloth napkin she had hand-embroidered, especially for the occasion. Richard nodded, though part of him feared what was coming. Rebecca had a disconcerting habit of asking questions that forced him to reflect on aspects of his life he preferred to keep buried. "Why do you work so much? I mean, you already have more money than you could spend in several lifetimes. The boys miss you." The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Richard set his fork aside and looked out the small kitchen window, watching the city lights spread out in the distance. How could he explain to a woman who earned in a year less than he spent in a week that work was his way of escaping pain? How could he say that every extra hour at the office was one less hour spent thinking about Catherine, his wife, and how he had failed her when she needed him most? "It's complicated, Rebecca," he murmured, avoiding her gaze. "Complicated? How?" she pressed, with that gentle persistence that made it impossible to simply drop the subject. Richard sighed deeply. There was something about the atmosphere of that home, about Rebecca's genuine simplicity, that made him want to lower the defenses he had built over the years. "Catherine, my wife, fell ill 3 years ago," he began, his voice strained. "Cancer. During the first year of treatment, I kept working as usual, thinking money would solve everything. I paid for the best doctors, the most expensive treatments, the most sophisticated clinic in the United States." Rebecca leaned forward, listening intently. She had placed her hands on the table, and Richard noticed how different they were from his own, calloused with small cuts from so much housework, yet infinitely warmer. "And did she get better?" Rebecca asked softly. "For a while, yes. The doctors said she was responding well to treatment. I convinced myself I had done the right thing, that my dedication to business was saving my family." Richard paused, fighting back the tears threatening to fall. "But in the second year she worsened quickly, and that's when I realized that while I was building a financial empire, I was losing my wife." The silence that followed was filled only by the ticking of the antique wall clock Rebecca had inherited from her grandmother. It was a comforting sound, unlike the oppressive silence of Richard's mansion, where only the hum of electronic devices broke the stillness. "Did she say anything?" Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Over the last few months, she begged me to stay home more. She said it didn't matter if we lost money, that she just wanted the family together." Richard wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "But I was stubborn. I thought I knew what was best for everyone. I kept traveling for work, closing deals, expanding the company." Rebecca got up from the chair and went to the small sink, where she started heating water for tea. She knew Richard needed a moment to collect himself, and her intuition told her the conversation was only beginning. "You blame yourself for this?" she said, not as a question but as a statement. "Of course I blame myself," Richard exploded, slamming his hand on the table hard enough to make the glasses tremble. "She asked me to be there, and I chose money. I chose meetings and contracts over holding the hand of the woman I loved." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Rebecca returned to the table with 2 cups of chamomile tea, placing one in front of Richard. The gentle aroma helped ease the tension that had settled in the room. "Mr. Richard, can I tell you something about myself?" she asked, sitting back down. He nodded, grateful for the chance to shift the conversation. "When I was 15, my father left home, just disappeared one day, leaving me, my mother, and my 2 younger brothers behind." Rebecca stirred her tea slowly, as if the words were hard to say. "For years I hated him. I thought he was the worst person in the world for abandoning us when we needed him most." "And then?" Richard asked, genuinely interested. "Years later, I found out the truth. My father didn't leave because he wanted to. He had taken on huge debts trying to save the family's small business. Dangerous people were threatening us. He left home to protect us, sacrificing his own happiness to keep us safe." Richard took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. There was something deeply comforting about Rebecca's story, even though it was painful. "How did you find out?" "He came back when I turned 25, showed up at our door, older, wearier, but with all the debts paid and no enemies chasing him." Rebecca smiled sadly. "I spent 10 years of my life hating a man who sacrificed himself out of love for his family." "And did you reconcile?" "Yes, but it wasn't easy. It took time for me to understand that sometimes people make choices that seem wrong on the outside, but have deep reasons only they know." Rebecca looked straight into Richard's eyes. "Do you really think you worked so hard just for money?" The question caught Richard off guard. He had never truly questioned his deeper motivations. "I always thought so." He hesitated. "Or maybe you worked so hard because it was the only way you knew how to show love, by providing for your family, making sure they never went without." Rebecca's words echoed in Richard's mind like ringing bells. Could she be right? Was his obsession with work actually a twisted form of love? "Catherine always said I showed love through actions, not words," he murmured, more to himself than to Rebecca. And what greater action than making sure she had access to the best treatments in the world? Rebecca asked gently. Richard felt something shift in his chest, like a long-locked door slowly creaking open. But before she could explore that feeling more deeply, the sound of hurried footsteps on the stairs broke the moment. "Aunt Rebecca! Aunt Rebecca!" Emily's high-pitched voice echoed through the house. Rebecca quickly stood up, concerned. Emily was a well-behaved child who rarely made noise or ran inside the house. "What happened, sweetheart?" Rebecca asked as Emily appeared in the kitchen, still in her pajamas with eyes red from crying. "Michael has a high fever and won't stop shaking," Emily said between sobs. "He said he feels really cold." Richard immediately rose from his chair, his paternal instinct overriding any discomfort he might have felt about being in Rebecca's house. "Where is he?" he asked, already heading toward the stairs. "In Aunt Rebecca's room. She let us sleep there today because our air conditioning broke, and her room is cooler," Emily explained, following her father and Rebecca upstairs. Rebecca's house was even smaller than Richard had imagined. The upper floor consisted of just 2 small bedrooms and a bathroom. Rebecca's room was Spartan but cozy, with a single bed, an old dresser, and a few family photos on the walls. Michael was curled up in bed, shivering under the covers. His skin was pale and sweaty, and he groaned softly in discomfort. "Son, how are you feeling?" Richard knelt beside the bed, placing his hand on the boy's forehead. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Michael asked weakly. "Daddy came to have dinner with Aunt Rebecca," Emily quickly explained. "They were talking in the kitchen." Richard exchanged a glance with Rebecca. It was strange how the children referred to her as aunt, yet it somehow felt natural. She had become much more than just a nanny to them. "I'll call Dr. Wilson," Richard said, pulling out his phone. "Mr. Thompson, wait," Rebecca gently interrupted. "Before calling the doctor, why don't we try some home remedies first? I know you're used to solving everything with money, but sometimes the simplest treatments are the most effective." Richard hesitated. His instinct was to grab Michael and rush to the most expensive hospital in the city, but there was something in Rebecca's calm confidence that made him pause. "What do you have in mind?" "First, let's give him a lukewarm bath to bring the fever down. Then some lemon balm tea with honey to soothe him, and lots of love." Rebecca was already moving, gathering towels and preparing what they needed. "Aunt Rebecca always knows what to do when we get sick," Emily said confidently. "See, it's true," Michael murmured from the bed. "When I had a stomachache last week, she made me tea that fixed me in an hour." Richard watched Rebecca work with calm, caring efficiency. She tested the water temperature with her elbow, laid out clean clothes for Michael, and arranged everything with a naturalness that revealed years of experience caring for people. "Come on, Michael, your dad will help you with the bath," Rebecca said. "Me?" Richard seemed surprised. "Of course, it's important for parents to be involved when their children are sick. It builds bonds," Rebecca explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Over the next 20 minutes, Richard found himself doing things he hadn't done in years. He helped Michael bathe, talked to him about how he was feeling, and even sang a song Catherine used to sing when the children were little. "Dad, you remember Mum's song?" Michael smiled weakly. "Of course I do, son. Your mum sang it every time you got sick." Richard felt a lump in his throat. After the bath, Rebecca prepared the promised tea and sat on the bed beside Michael, helping him take small sips. Emily settled in on the other side, and Richard sat in the nearby chair watching the scene. "Aunt Rebecca, tell the story about the princess who was afraid of the dark," Emily requested. "You want to hear it again?" Rebecca smiled. "I do," Michael said, already looking a little better. "I've never heard that story," Richard commented. "Aunt Rebecca makes up the best stories in the world," Emily explained proudly. "She never repeats any. They're all different." Rebecca began telling the story, and Richard found himself hypnotized, not just by the creative narrative, but by the way she modulated her voice, made expressive gestures, and included the children in the story, asking their opinions on what the princess should do in each difficult situation. It was clear those children were receiving something he had never been able to give: complete and selfless attention. Rebecca wasn't checking her phone or seeming worried about other obligations. She was there, fully present in body and soul. Gradually, Michael relaxed and his breathing became more even. His fever seemed to be going down, and he dozed off during the story. "How do you do that?" Richard asked when they went down to the kitchen, leaving the children asleep. "Do what?" "Stay so present, so focused on them. I've never been able to do that. Even when I'm physically with them, my mind is always somewhere else." Rebecca poured more tea for both of them and sat at the table again. The conversation had created an intimacy between them that neither had expected. "Can I be honest with you? Please. You're afraid to connect emotionally with your children because you're afraid of losing them too, like you lost Catherine." The observation was so precise that Richard felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. He started and stopped. "It's a normal reaction, Mr. Thompson. When we lose someone we love deeply, sometimes our minds try to protect us by keeping us emotionally distant from other important people." Rebecca spoke with the wisdom of someone who had lived far, more than her early 30s suggested. "Did you study psychology?" "No, but I took care of my grandmother during the last 5 years of her life. She had Alzheimer's." Rebecca sighed. "I learned a lot about caring for people, about being present in difficult moments, about the value of the time we spend with those we love. That's why you're so good with Michael and Emily. Maybe, but also because they're special children. It's easy to love kids who are so affectionate and smart." Richard looked around the small kitchen again. There was something there that his luxurious mansion didn't have: genuine human warmth. It wasn't about money or expensive things. It was about presence, attention, and care. "Rebecca, can I ask you a personal question now?" "Of course. Why did you put so much effort into this dinner? I mean, you prepared a special meal, set the table so carefully, even embroidered new napkins. Why?" Rebecca blushed slightly, nervously stirring her tea. "You'll think it's silly. I promise I won't. It's just, the children talk about you so much. Michael wants to be a businessman like his father when he grows up. Emily always tells everyone she has the smartest dad in the world." Rebecca paused, as if gathering courage to continue. "And I wanted to get to know the person who raised 2 such special children better, but they spend much more time with you than with me. That doesn't change the fact that you're their hero. They see you as a strong man who takes care of his family, who works hard to give them the very best. Rebecca smiled sadly. I wanted to understand that man better, so I could help the children connect more with you. Richard felt as if a dagger had pierced his chest. Not from pain, but from an emotion he couldn't quite identify. You did all this for them. And also out of personal curiosity, Rebecca admitted honestly. You're different from what I expected. Different how? More human, more vulnerable. I thought you'd be arrogant, distant, one of those rich men who treat everyone as beneath them. She hesitated. But you're just a father who's hurting and doesn't know how to deal with it. The silence that followed was filled with mutual understanding. Richard realized that for the first time in years, someone had seen beyond the successful facade he presented to the world. Michael is doing better. Emily appeared in the kitchen, interrupting the moment. How do you know, sweetheart? Rebecca asked. He stopped shaking and is breathing normally, and he asked for water. They went upstairs to check, and indeed, Michael looked much better. His fever had gone down significantly, and he was awake, still weak, but clearly out of danger. Dad, are you staying here tonight? Michael asked hopefully. Oh, son, I can't. I have a very early meeting tomorrow and... You could cancel it, Emily suggested simply. It's not that simple, Emily. Why not? Michael joined his sister. You always say you're the boss. Can't the boss cancel a meeting? Richard looked at Rebecca, who was silently observing the exchange. He could see in her eyes a mix of hope and skepticism, as if she were rooting for him to make the right choice, but already expected him to let the kids down again. Richard hesitated. The next morning's meeting was important. It was with Japanese investors who were only in town for 2 days. Cancelling would mean losing a business opportunity that had taken months to arrange. But looking into his children's hopeful eyes and remembering his conversation with Rebecca about priorities, he found himself at a crossroads. You know what? You're right. I am the boss, he said, picking up his phone. I'll reschedule the meeting. The smiles that lit up Michael and Emily's faces were worth more than any deal he could close. Rebecca simply smiled quietly and proudly. But where will I sleep? Richard asked, glancing around the small room. You can use my room, Rebecca offered. I'll sleep on the living room couch. Absolutely not. I won't kick you out of your own bed. Then I'll sleep in the living room, and you can have my room, Emily suggested. And Aunt Rebecca can sleep in your bed, Dad. Your house is huge. Everyone laughed at the childish logic, but Rebecca shook her head. I can't leave the house empty, Emily. And besides, I need to stay close to take care of Michael tonight. Then I'll sleep on the floor, Richard decided. Rebecca, lend me some blankets and I'll make a bed right here in the room. Dad, this will be like an adventure, Michael cheered, clearly feeling much better. And so, Richard Thompson, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the region, spent his first night in many years sleeping on the floor in the simple room of his children's nanny, listening to the peaceful sounds of their breathing as they slept. But the most surprising thing was that he slept better that night than he had in months on his $15,000 king-size bed. The next morning, Richard woke to the smell of coffee and homemade bread coming from the kitchen. For a moment, he was disoriented, unsure where he was. Then it all came back. Dinner, the conversation with Rebecca, Michael getting sick, his decision to stay. When he went downstairs to the kitchen, he found Rebecca preparing breakfast. She had woken up early to bake fresh bread, and the small table was set with the same attention to detail as the night before. Good morning, Mr. Richard. How did you sleep? Surprisingly well, he answered honestly. And you? Was the living room couch comfortable? I've slept in worse places, she smiled. Michael had a good night. I checked his temperature a few times and everything's normal. Thank you for looking after him. I should have done that. You were tired. Besides, we're learning together. Rebecca poured him coffee into a cup that, though simple, was spotlessly clean and served with genuine care. Moments later, Michael and Emily came downstairs, Michael clearly much better and Emily radiant at having her father home on a weekday morning. Daddy, can you have breakfast with us every day? Emily asked hopefully. Sweetheart, it's complicated. I usually have very early meetings and "Ja, but today you cancelled them and the world didn't end," Michael observed shrewdly. Richard glanced at Rebecca, who was busy preparing the plates, but he could see a small smile at the corner of her mouth. "That's true," he admitted. The world didn't end. During breakfast, Richard found himself part of conversations he hadn't had in years. Michael talked about a science project he was working on at school. Emily shared about a play her class was preparing. And for the first time, Richard was truly listening, asking questions, showing real interest. "Daddy, will you come to my play?" Emily asked. "When is it?" "Next Thursday afternoon." Richard mentally ran through his schedule. Thursday afternoon, he had a teleconference with the New York City branch and then a meeting with the accountant. Nothing that couldn't be rescheduled. "Of course I'll be there, Princess." Emily squealed with joy and threw herself into her father's arms, making everyone laugh. It was a simple moment, but filled with genuine happiness. After breakfast, while the children got ready for school, Richard helped Rebecca wash the dishes. It was something he'd never done in his own home. He had staff for that, but here it felt natural. "Rebecca, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Last night, when you said you wanted to get to know the man who raised such special children better, were you surprised by what you found?" Rebecca paused, a cup in hand, carefully considering her answer. "I was surprised to find that you're much more like those children than I imagined." "How so?" "Michael and Emily are sweet, affectionate, but also very emotionally lost. They're trying to understand the world without their mother, and with a father who, though he loves them deeply, is absent." Rebecca dried the cup carefully. "And last night I realized you're just as lost. The three of you are suffering the same loss, but each dealing with it alone." The observation was so sharp that Richard stopped washing the plate in his hands. "You think we're all grieving? Alone? I don't think it, I know it. And that's a tragedy because you could be helping each other heal together." Just then, Emily appeared in the kitchen, ready for school. "Aunt Rebecca, can we make a request?" "What request?" "Sweetheart, can you listen too, Daddy?" Emily looked at her father. "Of course, Princess. Michael and I talked and we want Aunt Rebecca to live with us." Richard choked on his coffee. Rebecca froze, the dish towel still in her hands. "Emily, you can't just make requests like that," Richard said when he caught his breath. "Why not? Our house is huge, there are so many empty rooms, and Aunt Rebecca could take care of us all the time without having to come and go every day." Emily spoke with the simple logic of a child. Michael appeared too, clearly in on his sister's plan. "And then Daddy could have dinner with us more often, because Aunt Rebecca makes the best food in the world," he added. Richard looked at Rebecca, who was clearly embarrassed by the situation. "Kids, you can't decide these things on your own," he said. "Besides, Rebecca has her own life, her own home." "But could she at least think about it?" Emily insisted. "Emily, this is adult conversation," Richard said firmly but gently. "Now, let's get to school before you're late." On the way to school, the children sat quietly in the back seat, clearly disappointed by their father's response. Richard felt torn between wanting to please his kids and the need to maintain appropriate boundaries. After dropping them off, he went back to pick up Rebecca and take her home. The mood in the car was tense. "I'm sorry they put you in such an awkward position," Richard said as he drove. "It wasn't awkward, it was touching," Rebecca replied calmly. "It's obvious they want more family stability. But you understand it would be inappropriate, right? I mean, you working and living in the same house." "I understand perfectly, Mr. Thompson, and you can rest assured I would never even consider such an arrangement." Her tone was professional, but Richard detected a slight coldness that hadn't been there before. Had he offended her somehow? When they reached her house, Rebecca quickly got out of the car. "Thank you for dinner last night and for letting me help with Michael," she said formally. "Rebecca, wait." Richard stepped out as well. "Did I say something wrong?" "No, sir. You just made it clear where I stand in this family. Thank you for the clarity." She went inside before he could respond. He stood in front of her modest home, confused and unsettled. Something about how their conversation had ended felt wrong, but he couldn't pinpoint what. For the rest of the morning, Richard struggled to focus on work. His mind kept drifting back to the night before, to the conversations he'd had with Rebecca, to how connected he'd felt with his children. Around noon, his secretary, Mrs. Harris, knocked on his office door. "Mr. Thompson, sorry to bother you, but I got a strange call." "What kind of call?" "It was from the children's school. They said Michael and Emily are in the principal's office because they refused to go home with anyone but Rebecca." Richard sighed deeply. He'd arranged for Mrs. Patterson, the housekeeper, to pick them up today since Rebecca didn't work on Wednesdays. Did they say why? According to the school secretary, Michael said he'll only go home if Aunt Rebecca picks them up, and Emily is crying, saying she's afraid you two had a fight and that Rebecca will leave forever. Richard closed his eyes, feeling a weight in his chest. The children had sensed the morning's tension and were reacting strongly. "I'll go there," he said, grabbing his car keys. At the school, Richard found Michael and Emily sitting in the principal's office, both with stubborn expressions and red, teary eyes. "Dad," Emily ran to him. "Where's Aunt Rebecca?" "She's at home resting. Mrs. Patterson came to pick you up." "We don't want to go with Mrs. Patterson," Michael said firmly. "We want Aunt Rebecca." The principal, Mrs. Susan, a woman in her 60s, watched with concern. "Mr. Thompson, the children said Rebecca was sick. Is that why they're so worried?" Richard realized the kids had made up an excuse to explain why Rebecca hadn't come. "No, she's not sick. Today just isn't her work day." "Dad, do you think Aunt Rebecca is mad at us because of what we asked this morning?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. Richard knelt in front of his children, finally understanding the root of the problem. "Listen, both of you. Rebecca isn't mad at you, and she's not going away. Sometimes adults need to talk about complicated things, but that doesn't mean someone will disappear from your lives." "Promise she won't leave on?" Michael asked. "I promise I'll talk to her and clear up any misunderstanding that might have happened," Richard replied carefully. After calming the kids and taking them home, Richard spent the rest of the afternoon thinking about the situation. Mrs. Patterson remarked that the children seemed more attached to Rebecca than she had realized before. "Mr. Thompson, if I may say so, those children have found in Rebecca something they were missing," she said while preparing their afternoon snack. "What do you mean?" "A stable maternal figure, someone who listens to them, who cares about the little details in their lives. Mrs. Patterson was a practical woman who had worked for the family for over 10 years. Not that you're not a good father, but children need maternal care too. Do you think I should consider their suggestion about Rebecca living here?" "It's not my place to say, sir, but I can tell you that in the 6 months she's worked here, I've seen more smiles on those children's faces than in the 2 years before." That evening at dinner, Michael and Emily were quiet and somber. It was obvious they were worried about Rebecca and the changes they sensed happening around them. "Dad, you said you talked to Aunt Rebecca," Emily reminded him. "And I will, sweetheart. Tomorrow when she comes to work." "But what if she doesn't want to work here anymore?" Michael asked in a small voice. Richard looked at his children and realized they were genuinely terrified at the thought of losing Rebecca, and, if he was honest with himself, so was he. "Why do you think she wouldn't want to work here anymore?" "Because we were really annoying asking her to live here," Emily murmured. "And you got mad?" "I wasn't mad, honey. I just said it was an adult conversation." "But the way you said it was kind of sharp," Michael observed. Richard realized the children had picked up on nuances in the conversation that he himself hadn't noticed at the time. "You're right, I could have spoken more gently," he admitted, "and that's why I'll talk to Rebecca tomorrow, to clear things up." "And then will you have dinner together again?" Emily asked hopefully. "We'll see, sweetheart. We'll see." That night, Richard had trouble sleeping. He kept thinking about his conversation with Rebecca, the children's reaction, and especially how he had felt in her home. There was a simplicity there, an authenticity that his life had lost long ago. Around 2 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and went to his office. He turned on his computer and tried to work, but his mind kept wandering. Eventually, he opened a drawer where he kept some old photos of Catherine and the children. In one, Catherine was in the kitchen of their old house before they moved to the mansion. She was making cookies with Michael and Emily, who couldn't have been more than 5. Everyone was covered in flour and smiling. It was a simple photo, but it captured a moment of pure happiness. Richard remembered how Catherine always prioritized those simple moments. She had a way of turning every day, activities into special adventures for the kids. And yesterday in Rebecca's home, he had seen the same quality, the ability to be completely present in the moment. Was he making a mistake by keeping his distance from Rebecca? Was his concern with propriety preventing his family from finding the cure they needed? The next morning, Richard woke up determined to have an honest talk with Rebecca. But when he got home after dropping the kids off at school, Mrs. Patterson informed him that Rebecca had called saying she was sick and couldn't work. Sick how? He asked, immediately worried. She didn't say, just that she wasn't feeling well and needed to take the day off. Richard was uneasy all day. Rebecca had never missed work since she started caring for the children. Was she really sick? Or was she avoiding the family because of the awkwardness from the day before? By late afternoon, when he went to pick up Michael and Emily from school, he decided to stop by Rebecca's house to check on her. "Dad, are we going to see Aunt Rebecca?" Emily asked hopefully when he turned toward her house. "Just to see if she's okay. She missed work today because she was sick." "Sick how?" Michael asked, concerned. "I don't know. That's why we're visiting her." When they arrived at Rebecca's house, Richard knocked, but no one answered. He could see lights on inside, so he knew she was there. "Rebecca, it's me, Richard. I brought the kids to see how you're doing." After a few minutes, Rebecca opened the door. It was clear she had been crying. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she looked exhausted. "Aunt Rebecca?" Emily immediately threw herself into her arms. "Are you sick?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just a little under the weather." Rebecca hugged the girl but avoided looking at Richard. "Can we come in?" Richard asked gently. Rebecca hesitated, but the kids were already stepping inside, so she had no choice. "Aunt Rebecca, your house is a mess," Michael observed. Indeed, Rebecca's usually spotless home was disorganized. Fabric was strewn across the living room table, sewing threads everywhere, and several pieces of clothing in various stages of completion. "Sorry for the mess. I'm working on a personal project," Rebecca explained. "What kind of project?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. "It's not important," she replied evasively. Emily, with the natural curiosity of children, was already examining the scattered clothes. "Aunt Rebecca, these dresses are beautiful. Who are you making them for?" They're for a church charity event. Some ladies from the community asked me to make dresses for them." Richard looked more closely at the work. The pieces were simple but showed exceptional skill. The finishes were perfect, the details meticulous. "Rebecca, you're a seamstress?" he asked, surprised. "I do some side work." "Learned from my grandmother," she replied modestly. "Side work. This is professional quality." Richard picked up one of the dresses to examine it further. "Where did you learn to do finishes like these?" "My grandmother was a professional seamstress. She worked in a clothing factory for 40 years. Taught me everything she knew." Rebecca seemed uncomfortable with the praise. "And you've been doing this for a long time?" "Since I was 15. It helps supplement my income." Richard did the math in his head. If Rebecca had been sewing for over 15 years and still needed to work as a nanny to make ends meet, it meant she was probably earning very little for her sewing work. "How much do you charge for a dress like this?" "Mr. Richard, that's not important." Rebecca tried to change the subject. "Please answer me." "It depends on the dress, $30 to $50. Richard nearly choked. He had seen far less elaborate dresses selling for 10 times that in mall stores. $30? For all this work? "It's what people in the community can afford," Rebecca said simply. But that's absurd. You're practically giving your work away." "Mr. Richard, not everyone has the same financial means. For a woman earning minimum wage, $50 is already a lot of money." Richard looked around the room, seeing, for the first time, not just the simplicity of Rebecca's home, but the dignity with which she lived within her limitations. She wasn't just surviving, she was actively contributing to her community, even if it meant working for almost nothing. "Aunt Rebecca, can you teach me how to sew?" Emily asked, interrupting Richard's thoughts. "Of course, sweetheart. It's a very useful skill." "Me too?" Michael surprised everyone with his request. "Sewing isn't for boys," Michael said automatically. Who told you that? Rebecca asked. Some of the best tailors in the world are men. And besides, it's always good to know how to fix your own clothes. Richard watched the interaction, once again impressed by Rebecca's practical wisdom. She had a way of expanding the children's horizons without making it feel like a lesson. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. Rebecca, can I speak with you privately for a minute? Richard asked. She nodded and led him to the small kitchen while the children continued examining the sewing projects in the living room. First, I want to apologize for how I reacted yesterday morning. I was rude and unnecessarily formal with you. You weren't rude. You just made it clear what the nature of our professional relationship is, Rebecca replied, but her voice was cold. But that's what bothers me. It shouldn't just be professional, should it? I mean, you're so much more than an employee to this family. Rebecca looked at him with an expression mixing surprise and caution. What exactly are you trying to say? I'm trying to say that you've become part of our family in a way I didn't expect, and that scares me. Why does it scare you? Richard hesitated, struggling to find the right words, because when you become important to someone, you also gain the power to hurt them when you leave. Rebecca fell silent for a moment, digesting what he'd said. You think I'm going to leave? I don't know. Sometimes I get the feeling you might, especially after yesterday. Mr. Richard, can I be honest? Please. I never intended to leave. I love taking care of Michael and Emily and, well, I've grown attached to this family too, she paused. But sometimes I feel like I'm in a strange position. I'm not their mother, but I care for them as if I were. I'm not family, but I act as if I am. And that can be confusing for all of us. Confusing how? The children call me aunt. They ask me to live with you. They want me to be part of family decisions. Rebecca fidgeted nervously with a dish towel. And sometimes I forget I'm just an employee. You're not just an employee, Rebecca. You're... Richard stopped, realizing he didn't quite know how to define her role. Exactly. That's what's confusing. They fell silent for a moment, both lost in thought. What if it weren't confusing? Richard asked suddenly. What do you mean? What if we clarified things? What if we found a way for you to officially be part of the family without it being strange or inappropriate? Rebecca looked at him skeptically. What exactly are you suggesting? Before Richard could answer, Michael and Emily appeared in the kitchen. Dad, we have an idea, Emily announced excitedly. What idea? Aunt Rebecca could sell the clothes she makes at your company's store, Michael quickly explained. At the company store? We don't have a store, son. No, but you could open one, and Aunt Rebecca could be the official seamstress. Emily finished her brother's thought. Richard looked at Rebecca, who was flushed with embarrassment. Kids, you can't just go around suggesting things like that. Why not? Michael interrupted. You always say it's good to help people, and Aunt Rebecca makes beautiful clothes. It's a way to help and do business at the same time. The simplicity of the children's logic once again left Richard impressed. Why hadn't he thought of that before? Michael's right, he said slowly. Rebecca, have you ever considered selling your work for more appropriate prices? Mr. Thompson, please, you don't have to invent work for me out of pity. It's not pity, it's recognition. Your work is worth much more than what you charge. And if there's really a market for handmade clothes of this quality, why not explore it? Rebecca looked at him skeptically. Are you serious? I am. In fact, I'm thinking of something bigger than just selling your clothes. Bigger how? Richard was beginning to formulate an idea, but before he could fully develop it, Rebecca's phone rang. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. Rebecca, I need your help urgently. It's about Junior. Junior was Mrs. Jenkins' grandson, a 16-year-old boy who had dropped out of school the year before and kept getting into trouble around the neighborhood. What happened? Rebecca asked worriedly. He's at the police station. They caught him and some other boys graffitiing the school wall. I don't know what to do. Rebecca closed her eyes, clearly distressed. I'll go there now. Rebecca, you don't have a car. Would you like me to take you? Richard offered. You'd do that? Of course, and the kids can come with us. It'll be a chance for them to understand that sometimes we need to help our neighbors. On the way to the police station, Rebecca explained Junior's situation. The boy had lost his father 3 years ago and had been rebelling against everything and everyone since. His grandmother did what she could, but she worked all day as a cleaner and couldn't give him the attention he needed. "Why does he graffiti the school?" Emily asked. "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe it's the way he expresses the anger he feels," Rebecca answered thoughtfully. "Anger about what?" "About life, about his father leaving, about the hard situation his family's in." Rebecca looked out the window. "Sometimes, when we don't know how to deal with bad feelings, we do things we shouldn't." Richard listened, silently, once again struck by Rebecca's wisdom in explaining complex situations in a way the children could understand. At the police station, they found Mrs. Jenkins crying on the reception bench. She was a small, frail woman in her 60s, clearly desperate. "Rebecca!" She stood up when she saw them arrive. "Thank you for coming." "What's the situation?" "They said they'll release him today, but if it happens again, it could be more serious. I don't know what to do with that boy anymore." Richard watched the scene, feeling out of place but wanting to help somehow. When Junior was released, he turned out to be a tall, lanky boy with a defiant expression and eyes that mixed anger with sadness. "Grandma, you didn't have to call Rebecca," he muttered, clearly embarrassed. "Of course I did. Do you think I can handle these things alone?" "Junior, it's okay. We came to help," Rebecca said calmly. The boy looked at Richard and the kids with curiosity and suspicion. "Who are they?" "They're my friends, Richard and his children, Michael and Emily." "The guy in the suit is your boss?" Junior asked with a slightly aggressive tone. "It's more complicated than that," Rebecca replied diplomatically. On the way back, Junior stayed quiet in the back seat next to Mrs. Jenkins. Michael and Emily watched him curiously, but didn't ask any awkward questions. When they arrived at Mrs. Jenkins' house, Richard had an impulsive idea. "Junior, can I ask you something?" The boy looked at him suspiciously. "Sure." "Why do you do graffiti?" "Why do you want to know?" "Curiosity. I've never talked to someone who does graffiti before." Junior seemed surprised by the honest answer. "I don't know. I like drawing, and graffiti is a way to make my drawings huge." "Do you draw other things too?" "Sometimes." "Can I see?" Junior glanced at his grandmother, who nodded encouragingly. "I think I have some drawings in my room." Mrs. Jenkins' house was even simpler than Rebecca's, but just as clean and well kept. In the small room Junior shared with his grandmother, there were dozens of drawings scattered around. Richard was genuinely impressed by the quality of the work. "Junior, these drawings are amazing," he said, examining an elaborate illustration of a dragon. "They're just doodles," the boy replied, though it was obvious he was proud of the recognition. "These aren't doodles. This is art." Richard looked at Rebecca, who was watching the interaction with interest. "Junior, have you ever thought about using this talent in a more legal way?" "What do you mean?" "Well, companies pay artists to create designs, logos, illustrations. And you clearly have the talent for it. No one's gonna hire me. I didn't even finish high school. That can be fixed. The question is, would you like to turn this hobby into a profession?" Junior stared at Richard as if he were an alien. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. In fact, I'm starting to have an idea that might involve both you and Rebecca." "What idea?" Rebecca asked. "It's still forming in my head, but how about we meet tomorrow to talk more? All of us. Junior, Mrs. Jenkins, you, me, and the kids." "To talk about what exactly?" Mrs. Jenkins asked warily. "About opportunities. About using the talents you already have to create something bigger." On the way home, Michael and Emily asked lots of questions about Junior and his situation. "Dad, why does Junior do bad things if he draws so well?" Emily asked. "Sometimes when people feel lost or sad, they make bad choices, but that doesn't mean they're bad people," Richard explained. "And why does he feel lost?" "Because he lost his dad and is having a hard time dealing with it. Just like you were sad when you lost Mommy, but you were lucky to have lots of people to help." "Like Aunt Rebecca," Michael pointed out. "Exactly. And maybe now it's our turn to help Junior and Mrs. Jenkins." "How?" Emily asked. "I'm still thinking about it. But I think all of us together can find a solution." That night, after the kids went to bed, Richard stayed, up thinking about the idea forming in his mind. There was something connecting all the pieces. Rebecca's talent for sewing, Junior's artistic talent, the kids' need for more family stability, and his own search for purpose beyond just accumulating wealth. What if he could create something that benefited everyone? A business that wasn't just about profit, but about building a community. The next morning, Richard woke up with a clarity of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He had a concrete idea, and for the first time in a long while, he was excited about something that didn't just involve numbers and spreadsheets. During breakfast, he shared some of his thoughts with Michael and Emily. "Kids, yesterday you suggested Rebecca sell her clothes in one of our stores, remember?" "We remember," they answered in unison. "What if we actually did that? What if we created a place where talented people like Rebecca and Junior could work and be valued for what they know how to do?" "Like a workshop?" Emily asked, using a word she'd learned at school. "Similar, but bigger. A place where clothes and art are made, where these skills are taught to others." "And would Aunt Rebecca work there?" Michael asked hopefully. "If she wants to, yes. And Junior could also learn a real trade using the talent he has." The children were excited by the idea, but Richard knew the hard part would be convincing Rebecca. She was proud and wouldn't accept disguised charity. When Rebecca arrived for work, Richard noticed she seemed better than the day before. There was a lightness in her movements that hadn't been there in recent days. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Better. Thank you for yesterday, for what you did for Junior and Mrs. Jenkins." "I didn't do much, but actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." Rebecca looked at him curiously as she prepared the children's snacks. "Last night I kept thinking about our conversation, about your sewing work, about Junior's talent, about this feeling we all have of being a little lost in our lives. And I had an idea. But before I share it, I need to know, would you be willing to consider a big change in your life?" "What kind of change?" "One that would involve no longer being a nanny, but becoming, well, a businesswoman." Rebecca nearly dropped the juice she was pouring. "A businesswoman? Mr. Thompson, I think you've misunderstood who I am. I'm a simple woman who knows how to sew. I don't have enough education to be a businesswoman." "Who says you need a college degree to be a businesswoman? You have something far more valuable. Genuine talent and practical knowledge gained over years. But, Rebecca, let me explain my idea fully before you decide it's impossible." Over the next 20 minutes, Richard laid out his vision, creating an arts and crafts center that combined production, teaching, and sales. Rebecca would oversee sewing and textile design. Junior could learn graphic design and illustration, eventually creating prints for the clothing. Other talents from the community could be incorporated gradually. It would be like a cooperative, but with a business structure. People would be partners, not employees. Profits would be divided based on each person's contribution. Rebecca listened in silence, her expression shifting between disbelief and hope. "Mr. Thompson, this sounds too good to be true. Why would you do this? Do you want the selfish answer or the selfless one?" "Both. The selfless one is that I think I have enough resources to do something that benefits others, and this seems like a smart way to do it." Richard paused. "The selfish one is that I'm tired of making money just to make more money. I want to build something meaningful." "And where do the children fit into this?" "That's the most important part. They'd have a place to go after school where they could learn practical skills, help with the business, and still have you nearby. It would be like an extended family." Rebecca fell silent for a few minutes, clearly processing everything. "What if it fails? What if I can't handle the responsibility? Then we'll learn together. I've never built a business like this either, but I think together we can figure out how to make it work." "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but I'd also like you to talk to Junior and Mrs. Jenkins about the idea. If they're interested, we can set up a more formal meeting to discuss details." That afternoon, while the children played in the backyard, Rebecca called Mrs. Jenkins and explained Richard's proposal. An hour later, she called back. "Mrs. Jenkins is interested but suspicious. She wants to know what the real conditions are." "And Junior?" Junior was excited but also skeptical. He said, "Rich people always promise things and then disappear." His words, not mine. Richard understood the distrust. Probably many people had promised help to that neighborhood over the years and then vanished when things got complicated. "How about we arrange a meeting for Saturday at your place so they feel more comfortable? I can bring a basic business plan to show I'm serious." "You're really going to make a business plan?" "Rebecca, I spent the whole night crunching numbers. This idea isn't just an emotional impulse. I believe it can be financially viable and socially beneficial." "All right, I'll talk to them and confirm." On Friday, Richard did something he hadn't done in years. He left the office at 5 in the evening to have dinner at home with the kids. He wanted to talk to them about the meeting the next day and the possible changes that might happen. "Dad, if Aunt Rebecca becomes a businesswoman, will she still take care of us?" Emily asked worriedly. "She'll still be important in your lives, but maybe in a different way," Richard explained carefully. "Different how?" "Well, instead of staying here at home alone with her, you could go to the workshop after school. You could help with the work, learn new things, meet other people." "And you? Would you work there too?" Michael asked. "I'd be the main investor, so yes, I'd spend a lot of time there too, especially at the beginning." "So we'd get to spend more time together?" Emily asked hopefully. "Probably, yes." The kids exchanged excited glances. The idea of having their dad around more while still keeping Rebecca close was everything they could wish for. "Dad, if it works out, could you two get married?" Emily asked innocently. Richard nearly choked on his wine. "Emily, where did you get that idea?" "Well, you get along, she likes us, we like her, and you said she'd be like family. Isn't family when people live together and take care of each other?" Michael nodded in agreement with his sister's logic. "Kids, it doesn't work like that. Marriage is much more complicated." "Why is it complicated?" Michael asked. Richard found himself in a tricky spot. How do you explain the complex emotional, social, and practical aspects of marriage to 8-year-olds? Because for two people to get married, they have to love each other in a special way, not just like each other or work well together. "And don't you love Aunt Rebecca in that special way?" Emily persisted. The question caught Richard completely off guard. He'd never allowed himself to think of Rebecca in those terms. She was the nanny, then she became a friend, a confidant. But romantic love, that possibility had never consciously crossed his mind. It's complicated, Emily. Aunt Rebecca and I have a relationship based on taking care of you. It's not the same as the love I had for your mom." "But could it be?" Michael asked with the persistence typical of children. "I don't know, son. Those things aren't something you decide rationally." That night, after the kids went to bed, Richard stayed on the porch thinking about the conversation. His children's innocent questions had touched on something he'd been avoiding examining. Were his feelings for Rebecca deeper than just professional appreciation? Was the anxiety he'd felt when he thought she might leave more than just concern for the kids? He tried to analyze it objectively. Rebecca was an attractive, intelligent woman, kind to the children, and had shown an understanding of his personality that he hadn't expected. They talked easily. She challenged him in constructive ways, and there was a naturalness in their interaction that he hadn't felt with anyone since Catherine. But would it be fair to consider a romantic relationship with someone who depended on him financially? Wouldn't that create a problematic power dynamic? On the other hand, if the workshop project succeeded, Rebecca would become a business partner, not an employee. That would change the equation significantly. Richard shook his head, laughing at himself. Was he planning a complex social venture, just to create conditions where he could consider a romantic relationship? That seemed absurd even to him, but when he was honest with himself, he had to admit that the possibility of having Rebecca as a life partner, not just as a caregiver, for the children was appealing. Very appealing. On Saturday morning, Richard took the children with him to the meeting at Rebecca's house. He had prepared a full presentation with financial projections, an implementation timeline, and an organizational structure. When they arrived, they found Rebecca, Mrs. Jenkins, and Junior sitting in the small living room, all with expressions mixing hope and skepticism. "Good morning, everyone," Richard greeted them. Thank you for agreeing to talk about this idea. Before we start, I have a question, Junior said bluntly. Do you really believe this can work, or are you just trying to help us because you feel sorry for our situation? The question was direct and a little aggressive, but Richard respected the boy's honesty. Junior, I'll be completely frank with you. I started thinking about this because I want to help people who've become important to me. He gestured toward Rebecca. But I spent the whole week researching and crunching numbers because good intentions alone aren't enough. If I didn't believe this could be financially viable, I wouldn't be here. And the numbers add up, Mrs. Jenkins asked. Let me show you. For the next hour, Richard presented his research. He had discovered there was a growing market for high-quality handmade products, especially unique clothing and accessories. There were also government incentive programs for small businesses that could be utilized. The idea is to start small. A rented space, basic equipment, 3 or 4 people working. If it works, we expand gradually. And if it doesn't work, Rebecca asked, then we close the business without anyone losing their own money. I'll cover all the initial financial risks. That doesn't seem fair, Junior observed. Why not? Because you're paying for everything, and we're gaining without risking anything. Richard smiled. The boy had a strong sense of ethics. Junior, you'll be risking something much more valuable than money, time and energy. And if it works, you'll gain much more than if you were just someone else's employees. How so? Because each of you would own a share of the business. If the company grows and prospers, you grow and prosper with it. Rebecca and Mrs. Jenkins exchanged glances. It was clear the proposal went beyond what they had imagined possible. Can I ask a personal question? Mrs. Jenkins said. Of course. Why is this important to you? I mean, you already have more money than you need. Why get involved in something this complicated? The question was direct, and Richard knew he needed an equally direct answer. Because over the past few months watching Rebecca with my children, I realized I've been living an empty life. I work 14 hours a day to earn money I don't need, while missing out on important moments with the people I love. He looked at Michael and Emily, who were listening intently. And also because meeting you all made me realize there are people with incredible talents who'll never have the chance to develop them just because they lack the initial resources. So, you're saying we're a charity project? Junior asked with a slightly defensive tone. No, I'm saying you're a business opportunity that also happens to be a good thing to do. The difference matters. Rebecca, who had stayed quiet for most of the presentation, finally spoke. Mr. Richard, this all sounds wonderful, but I need to understand one thing. What exactly would my role be in this company? You'd be the lead partner in the textile division, responsible for design, production, and quality. You'd also be one of the company's directors. Director? Rebecca looked shocked. Rebecca, you have 15 years of sewing experience. You know techniques many people with degrees don't, and you have a natural eye for design. Why wouldn't you be a director? Because I don't know anything. About administration, accounting, marketing, and you think I knew those things when I started my first business? We learn by doing. Besides, that's what consultants and courses are for. Junior, who had grown increasingly interested during the presentation, asked a practical question. When would this start? If you're all interested, we can start looking for a space. Next week. My lawyer is already preparing the legal documents. In a month, we could be up and running. A month? Mrs. Jenkins seemed surprised. No point dragging it out. If we're doing this, let's do it now. Michael and Emily, who had stayed quiet the whole meeting, finally spoke up. Dad, does this mean Aunt Rebecca won't work at our house anymore? Emily asked with concern. It means she won't be your nanny anymore, but you'll still spend plenty of time with her, just at the workshop instead of at home. And can we help make the clothes? Michael asked excitedly. With adult supervision, of course, Richard smiled. And can we learn to draw with Junior? Emily looked hopefully at the boy. Junior, clearly unused to being seen as a mentor, blushed slightly. If you want, I guess I can teach you a few things. So, is it decided? Richard asked, looking around the room. I'm in, Junior said immediately. Me too. Mrs. Jenkins nodded. Junior needs an opportunity, and this seems like the best he'll get. Everyone turned to Rebecca, who was clearly wrestling with the decision. "It's such a big change," she murmured. "The best changes usually are," Richard said gently. "But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough for this?" "Rebecca, you're already good enough. The only difference is now you'll be properly recognized and rewarded for it." Rebecca looked at the hopeful faces around the room. Junior excited for a different future, Mrs. Jenkins proud to see her grandson get a real chance, Michael and Emily eager for a new adventure, and Richard watching her with a mix of encouragement and something else she couldn't quite place. "All right," she finally said, "let's try it." The room erupted in celebration. Michael and Emily cheered, Junior grinned widely, and Mrs. Jenkins whispered a prayer of thanks. Richard felt a wave of satisfaction, unlike any business success he'd ever experienced. There was something deeply rewarding about creating opportunities for people he'd grown to love and respect. But while everyone celebrated around him, Richard realized he had committed to something far more complex than a simple business partnership. He had created the conditions for an extended family, and now he would have to navigate not only the challenges of a new company, but also the intricate emotional dynamics this would inevitably bring. What had started as a simple dinner at the Nanny's house had turned into something that would fundamentally change their lives. And for the first time in years, Richard was genuinely excited to see what would come next. In the following weeks, the project took shape quickly. Richard found the perfect space, an old carpentry warehouse downtown that had been renovated but had stood empty for months. It had good natural lighting, enough room for workshops and classrooms, and was centrally located, making it easily accessible for both customers and employees. Rebecca was nervous but determined. She had started taking an online course on small business management and spent her evenings studying marketing and financial management concepts. "I had no idea selling clothes was so complicated," she remarked one evening when Richard stopped by to check on the preparations. "It's not complicated. It's just different from what you were used to. Before, you only worried about making the clothes. Now you have to think about the customer, pricing, competition, quality. That's what makes me nervous. What if I can make beautiful clothes but don't know how to sell them?" "Rebecca, you have something no course can teach. You understand people's real needs. Just yesterday, when you explained to the stationery store owner why the dresses you make are better than the ones from the downtown store, it was a masterclass in marketing. But that was just normal conversation, it wasn't marketing." "Exactly. Marketing is communicating the value of what you offer, and you do that naturally." Junior turned out to be a pleasant surprise. The boy had thrown himself into learning graphic design and was coming up with creative ideas for prints and logos. More importantly, he had gone back to night school, determined to finish high school. "Junior, these designs are amazing," Richard said, looking at the boy's latest creations. "Where do you get inspiration for this?" "I don't know. I look at things on the street, in nature, and imagine how they'd look on a shirt or a bag. That's natural talent. You have an eye for turning everyday observations into applied design." The boy smiled proudly. It was clear he was thriving, with the recognition and opportunities he was receiving. Mrs. Jenkins had volunteered to handle basic administrative tasks, inventory control, organizing the space, answering phones. She was thrilled to have an active role in the project and the chance to learn new things at 60. Michael and Emily were beyond excited. Every day they asked when they could visit the new space and when they would start working there. "Dad, you said we could help. What kind of work will we do?" Michael asked. "Age-appropriate tasks. Organizing materials, helping package products, maybe learning some basic sewing and drawing techniques." "And will we earn money too?" Emily asked hopefully. "You'll get an allowance based on the work you do. That way you learn about responsibility and the value of hard work." The prospect of earning their own money made the children even more excited. 3 weeks after the initial meeting, the space was ready. Richard had invested in professional sewing equipment, drafting tables, computers for graphic design, and a small showroom area to welcome customers. On the day of the official opening, just for themselves, they all gathered in the new space. Rebecca walked through the workshop, running her hands over the sewing machines as if they were sacred objects. "I never imagined I'd one day have..." Equipment like this to work with, she murmured. And you never imagined you'd own your own business? Richard asked. Not even in my wildest dreams, she smiled, though there were tears in her eyes. Thank you for all of this, for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself. You don't have to thank me, Rebecca. You'll repay every dollar invested here through your hard work and dedication. Junior was setting up his digital designs on the new computer, clearly dazzled by the possibilities of professional technology. Mr. Richard, can I ask you something? He said, without taking his eyes off the screen. Of course. Why do you trust us so much? I mean, you barely know me, and I've already gotten into trouble with the police. Richard paused, organizing the materials to look directly at the boy. Junior, I've known plenty of well-dressed, well-educated people who are far less trustworthy than you. Character isn't about money or the mistakes we make when we're lost. It's about how we respond when given an opportunity. And how do you know I'll respond well? Because last week you brought me $30 you found on the workshop floor to return it, even though no one would have known if you kept it. That tells me more about you than any diploma. Junior blushed but was clearly proud of the recognition. Michael and Emily explored every corner of the space, making plans about where they'd make their contributions to the business. Dad, where's our work table? Emily asked. You'll share this table here with Junior. He'll teach you how to draw and you can help him with ideas. And where will Aunt Rebecca teach us to sew? Over in that area. But first you need to learn the basics safely. Mrs. Jenkins was organizing a small kitchen Richard had included in the project. So we can have snacks and eat lunch together, he had explained. That way, we keep the family spirit. Mr. Richard, Mrs. Jenkins called to him. Can I say something? Of course, Mrs. Jenkins. In 40 years of work, I've never had a boss who cared whether I had a place to eat lunch. You're different. There's no boss here, Mrs. Jenkins. We're all partners, all owners. It'll be hard to get used to that. It will be for all of us. We're inventing a new way of working together. At the end of the day, as he was closing up the workshop, Richard found himself alone with Rebecca. The others had already left, and they were doing one last check of the space. How are you feeling? He asked. Grounded and excited at the same time. It's a strange feeling. Normal for someone starting something new and important. They walked in silence for a few minutes, making sure everything was secure. Richard, Rebecca said, using his name without Mr. for the first time. Yes? Can I ask you a personal question? Of course. What really changed for you? I mean, 3 months ago, you were a businessman who barely knew his own kids. Now you're starting a social enterprise and spending time with us every day. That's a huge, fast change. Richard stopped walking and leaned against one of the work tables. Catherine, my wife, always said I had a good heart but was lost in my work. She said one day I'd remember who I really was. And did you remember? I think so. Or at least I'm trying to reconnect with that person. He looked around the workshop. And you all helped me with that. You, the kids, even Junior and Mrs. Jenkins. You showed me there are things more important than money. Like what? So how to have people who truly care about you. How to use your resources to create something good. How to be present in the lives of those you love. Rebecca smiled, but there was something melancholic in her expression. What is it? Richard asked. Nothing, it's just sometimes it all feels too good to be true, like it's a dream and I'll wake up back in my old life. Rebecca, look around. This is real. Your sewing machines, Junior's designs, the plans we've made. None of this will disappear tomorrow. I know, it's just insecurity. Richard stepped closer to her, feeling the urge to offer some physical comfort but holding back. There was still a fine line between professional partnership and personal closeness that he didn't want to cross without being sure of both their feelings. Rebecca, you deserve all the good things happening to you. You deserve recognition for your talent, financial independence, and respect as a professional. Thank you for saying that. Sometimes I need to hear it. And whenever you need to, just say so. We're in this together. In the first few months of operation, the workshop surpassed all expectations. Rebecca's clothing began attracting attention not just from the local community, but from customers across the region. Her unique pieces with impeccable finishes and designs blending tradition and modernity quickly gained a reputation. Junior had created a line of prints inspired by local culture that was being very well received. His illustrations of urban landscapes, regional flora, and folk elements gave the workshop's products a distinctive identity. Junior, the downtown store, wants to order 20 t-shirts with that sunset over the river print, Rebecca announced one morning. 20? Seriously? The boy could hardly believe it. Seriously, and they're asking if you have other designs with the same theme. I have a bunch. Junior ran to show his latest drawings. The group's dynamic was working better than Richard had hoped. Mrs. Jenkins had proven to be an excellent organizer and was even starting to grasp basic accounting. Michael and Emily went to the workshop every day after school and became unofficial mascots of the business, charming customers with their enthusiasm and innocent questions about the products. Aunt Rebecca, why do you make the stitches like that? Emily asked one day, watching Rebecca work on a complex piece. Because it makes the seam stronger and prettier at the same time, Rebecca explained patiently. Can I try? Of course, but let's start with something simpler. Michael had taken a special interest in graphic design and spent hours with Junior learning to use the computer programs. Junior, can I help with that tree print? He asked. Sure. You can pick the colors while I work on the sketch. The collaboration between different generations was creating a family-like atmosphere that went beyond just a work relationship. Richard split his time between his other businesses and the workshop, but found himself increasingly motivated by the new project. There was something deeply satisfying about seeing talents flourish and people thriving. Dad, you're happier now, Emily observed one afternoon as they were leaving the workshop. You think so? I do. You smile more, and you're not on your phone all the time. It's true, Michael agreed. And you talk to us more too. Richard realized the kids were right. He felt more fulfilled, more connected, more complete. But there was one complication he hadn't anticipated. His feelings for Rebecca were deepening in a way that left him increasingly confused. Working side by side every day, making decisions about the business together, watching how she interacted with the children and the other team members, Richard found himself admiring not just Rebecca's professional skills, but her very way of being as a person. She was generous without being naive, determined without being stubborn, affectionate without being possessive. And there were moments when she laughed at one of Junior's jokes, when she patiently explained something to the children, when she focused intensely on her work, when Richard caught himself simply watching her with a mix of admiration and something he was beginning to recognize as love. The problem was, he didn't know if these feelings were mutual or if Rebecca saw them merely as gratitude for the opportunity he had given her. The situation grew more complicated one Friday afternoon when they were working alone in the workshop while the others had left early. Richard, Rebecca said, organizing some fabrics, can I tell you something? Of course. Last night, I was lying in bed thinking about how much my life has changed these past few months, and I realized something. What? For years, I woke up every day knowing exactly how it would go. Housework, low-paying sewing jobs, financial worries. It was a predictable life, without big surprises. She paused, carefully folding a piece of fabric. Now, I wake up every day excited to come here to see what project we'll work on, what new client we'll win over, what new idea Junior will have. Is that good or bad? It's wonderful, but also scary. She looked directly at him. Because now I have something important to lose. The workshop? The workshop, this sense of purpose, you all, this family we've built here. The words, you all and family, echoed in Richard's mind, making him wonder if he had interpreted her tone correctly. Rebecca, you're not going to lose any of that. We're building something solid here. I know, it's just, well, sometimes I'm afraid I'm getting too attached. Too attached to what? To this life, to these people, to... She hesitated, then decided to be brave. To you. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Richard felt his heart race, but didn't know how to respond without risking complicating things further. Rebecca, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. It's just that working so closely, sharing so much, I sometimes forget what exactly the nature of our relationship is. Richard stepped closer to her, setting aside the fabric he had been examining. What do you think the nature of our relationship should be? I don't know, that's what confuses me. She smiled sadly. We're business partners. We're friends. You're the father of the children I love as if they were my own. But sometimes it feels like we're more. More like what? Like a real family. Like people who chose to share their lives, not just their work. Richard felt as if he were at a crossroads. He could cling to the safety of ambiguity or be honest about his own feelings. Rebecca, can I confess something to you? Of course. For weeks I've been struggling with the same feelings. You've become far more important to me than just a business partner, and it's not just because you take such good care of the kids or because you're so talented at what you do. No? No, it's because you make me want to be a better person. You reminded me of who I was before I got lost in work. You brought joy back into my home and my life. Rebecca looked at him with a mix of surprise and hope. And what does that mean? It means I'd like to explore the possibility of us being more than business partners, if you want that too. Richard, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Dad! Aunt Rebecca! Emily shouted, running into the workshop. I forgot my backpack here. Michael came right behind her, followed by Mrs. Patterson, who had gone to pick up the kids. Sorry to bother you, Mrs. Patterson said. Emily insisted she needed to get the backpack today. No problem, Richard said, trying to hide his disappointment at being interrupted at such an important moment. Rebecca had stepped away and was pretending to organize some materials, clearly also affected by the interruption. Aunt Rebecca, are you okay? Emily asked, noticing her expression. I'm fine, sweetheart. Just tired after a long day of work. On the way home, Richard tried to process the conversation that had been cut short. Rebecca had admitted having feelings for him, and he had reciprocated. But now they needed to find a way to continue that talk without the pressure of the kids and daily responsibilities. Dad, were you and Aunt Rebecca talking about something important? Michael asked in the car. Why do you ask? Because you both seemed kind of weird when we got there. Weird how? I don't know. Like you were talking about something serious. We were discussing business. Important decisions about the future of the workshop. Time-o, Emily said. What kind of decisions? Richard realized he had walked into a trap. The kids wouldn't give up their investigation easily. Decisions about expanding the business. New products we could develop. That's cool, Michael cheered. Does that mean the workshop is doing well? It means it's doing really well. And does it mean Aunt Rebecca is going to stay with us forever? Emily asked hopefully. It means we'll all keep working together for a long time. The answer seemed to satisfy the kids, but Richard knew he'd soon have to have more direct conversations with them about possible changes in his personal life. That night, after the children went to bed, Richard called Rebecca. Hi, she answered, her voice slightly nervous. Hi, I wanted to finish our conversation from earlier. Richard, maybe we should think more about this. I mean, it could complicate for a lot of things, or it could make a lot of things better. What if it doesn't work? What if we try a relationship and it fails? It would affect the business, the kids, everyone. Rebecca, are you afraid of what could go wrong or what could go right? The question caught her off guard. I guess, and both. I get that. But can I ask you something? If we don't try, will you spend the rest of your life wondering how it could have been? Probably. Then how about this? We take it slow. No pressure, no big expectations. We'll just see where these feelings take us. What about the kids? The kids will be happy. They've already asked several times if we're gonna get married. Rebecca laughed on the other end. Really? Dead serious. Emily even made a list of reasons why it'd be a good idea. What reasons? That you make the best food, that they like you, that I'm happier when you're around, and that we'd be a real family. Kids' wisdom can be scary sometimes. Sometimes they see things clearer than adults. There was a comfortable silence between them for a moment. Richard, can I ask for something? Of course. Let's really take it slow. I want to be sure this is real, not just because we've been working together and taking care. of the kids together. I completely agree. We have time to figure it out. And let's keep this between us for now, until we know where it's going. If that's what you want, yes. It is. At least until we're sure about how we feel. Okay, but Rebecca, yes? I'm glad we talked about this today. Me too. After hanging up the phone, Richard felt lighter than he had in years. There was something profoundly right about the idea of building a life with Rebecca, and for the first time since Catherine's death, he could imagine a future that included romantic love. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The next few months brought gradual but significant changes in Richard and Rebecca's relationship. They began occasionally going out to dinner after work, always under the guise of discussing business. They started spending more time talking after the children went to bed. Slowly, they began discovering aspects of each other that went beyond work and parental responsibilities. Richard learned that Rebecca had a subtle, clever sense of humor. She loved reading classic novels and had well-formed opinions about local politics. She had studied business administration for 2 years before having to drop out to care for her sick grandmother, and she dreamed of one day traveling to explore different textile traditions across the country. Rebecca discovered that Richard was far more sensitive than he appeared. He got emotional easily during movies, played the piano, badly by his own admission, and had an impressive memory for small details about the people he cared about. She learned that he had nearly given up on the business after Catherine's death, and that only his responsibility toward the children had stopped him from walking away from everything. "I used to think you were a cold person," Rebecca admitted during one of their evening walks in the park near the workshop. "Cold?" Richard seemed surprised. "When I first started working for you, I thought you were just another rich person who treated employees like furniture, polite but distant. And when did you change your mind?" "That first time Michael got sick and you were terrified. I saw that behind all that confidence was a father who cared deeply but didn't know how to express it. And now? Now I see that you're not cold. You're careful. You protect your feelings because you've been hurt badly before." The observation was so accurate that Richard fell silent for a moment. That's an interesting way to put it. It's the truth, isn't it? I suppose so. After Catherine died, it was easier to focus on work than to risk connecting emotionally with other people. And now? Now I'm trying to learn to trust again. In you, in the children, in this life we're building together. They had stopped, walking, and were sitting on a park bench. The streetlight cast a circle of intimacy around them. "Richard, can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "I'm in love with you." The words came out simply and directly, without drama, but with complete honesty. Richard turned to look at her fully. "Rebecca, you don't have to say anything right now. I just wanted you to know, because there came a point where pretending these were just confusing feelings became impossible. Can I tell you a secret too?" "Go ahead." "I'm in love with you too. And it scares me and makes me happy at the same time." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I don't want to ruin what we have. You, me, the kids, our extended family at the workshop. I'm afraid that if we try to turn this into romance, we might lose everything else." Rebecca took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "Richard, do you think a mother loves her children less when she marries their father?" "Of course not." "Then why would loving each other make us love the children less or care less about the work we've built?" The simplicity of her logic made him smile. "When you put it that way, my fears seem silly." "They're not silly. They're human. But maybe they're unnecessary." That night they kissed for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, full of promises and possibilities, one that seemed to seal not just the beginning of a romance, but the definitive transformation of a partnership into something deeper and more lasting. In the days that followed, they both felt like love-struck teenagers, trying to keep their secret while working side by side. But the children, with their natural intuition for shifts in the emotional atmosphere of adults, began to make comments. "Dad, you're humming," Emily observed one morning. "So? You never hum? Did something good happen?" Lots of good things are happening. The workshop is doing well. You're happy at school. And Aunt Rebecca looks prettier, Michael added innocently. Michael, Emily scolded him. You can't say a woman looks prettier, you have to say she's always pretty. But she really does look different, Michael insisted. More smiley. Richard exchanged a glance with Rebecca, who was packing the children's lunches and clearly listening to the conversation. Maybe she's smiling more because she's happy about the workshop's success, Richard suggested. Or because she's in love, Emily said casually. Emily, where do you get these ideas? Rebecca asked, blushing. From TV. And because you have that smile people get when they're in love. What smile is that? The one that starts in your eyes before it reaches your mouth. Richard and Rebecca looked at each other again, impressed by the girl's perception. Emily, you're very observant, Richard remarked. Thank you. So Aunt Rebecca really is in love? Emily, that's grown-up talk, Rebecca said diplomatically. But if you are, is it with someone we know? Michael joined the investigation. Kids, no more questions, Richard intervened. Finish your lunch or we'll be late. But on the way to school, the children kept whispering their speculations, not as quietly as they thought. I think she's in love with Dad, Emily said. You think? How do you know? Because she looks at him when he's not watching, and she blushes when he compliments her work. What about Dad? Dad looks at her too, and he's been way happier since she started working with us. It'd be cool if they got married, Michael commented. Really cool. Then Aunt Rebecca would really be our mum. Richard pretended to focus on the traffic, but grew more convinced it was time for an honest talk with the kids. That afternoon at the workshop, he discussed it with Rebecca. I think it's time we tell them, he said. Are you sure? Rebecca, they already know. We just haven't made it official. What if they don't approve? You heard them this morning. They've been rooting for this for months, Reese. But what if it's different when it's real? What if they feel like I'm replacing their mother? Rebecca, look at them. Do you think they see you as an outsider or as someone they love? Rebecca watched Michael and Emily working with Junior on a new design. Emily leaned against her shoulder while observing the work, and Michael kept running over to show her every little progress he made. They really do treat me like family, she admitted. Because you are family. The only difference is now we're making it official. How should we tell them? Simply. No big drama. Just explain that we fell in love and want to. See where it goes. What if they ask about marriage? We ask what they think of the idea. That night at dinner, Richard decided to bring it up. Kids, Rebecca and I want to talk to you about something important. Immediately, Michael and Emily stopped eating and paid full attention. What thing? Emily asked. Well, you've already noticed that Rebecca and I have become very close these past few months. Yes, the two replied in unison. And you've also commented that you think we're interested in each other. Are you? Michael asked hopefully. We are, Rebecca confirmed. We've fallen in love. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds before Emily burst out, I knew it, I knew it, I knew it. Emily, no need to shout, Richard laughed. But I really knew, Michael. Didn't I tell you they were in love? You did, Michael grinned widely. And now you're getting married. Well, we haven't gotten to that part yet, Rebecca explained. First, we want to make sure you're comfortable with this situation. Comfortable? Emily looked confused. Why wouldn't we be? Because it means the dynamics of our family will change, and we want to be sure you're okay with that. Change how? Michael asked. Well, if we continue this relationship, eventually Rebecca might come live with us. She'd officially become part of the family. Like a stepmom? Emily asked. More like a second mother, Richard corrected carefully. No one will ever replace the memory of your mum. But Rebecca can be a new maternal figure in your lives. That would be perfect, Michael cheered. Wait, Rebecca interjected. I don't want you to feel pressured to accept me just because you think it's what your dad wants. I want you to be honest about how you feel. Emily and Michael looked at each other, clearly communicating through that silent language twins sometimes develop. Aunt Rebecca, Emily finally said, do you want the truth? I do. We've already thought of you as our second mum for a long time. We just didn't know if we could say it. And why not? Because we were afraid you'd think it was too much responsibility and leave, Michael explained. Rebecca felt tears forming in her eyes. You really feel that way? You take care of us, teach us things, worry when we're sick, scold us when we do something wrong, Emily listed. Isn't that what a mom does? And besides, we love you, Michael added simply. And I love you too, Rebecca said, no longer holding back her tears. So much. So it's decided, Emily asked. You're officially dating? I guess so, Richard smiled, taking Rebecca's hand across the table. And then you'll get married? Emily, one thing at a time, Rebecca laughed. First we'll date and see how it goes. It'll work, Michael said with the absolute confidence of children. You already work as a family. Now it's just making it official. That night, after the kids went to bed, Richard and Rebecca sat on the porch to talk about their reaction. It went better than I expected, Rebecca admitted. Were you nervous? Very. I was afraid they'd feel like I was invading their mother's space. Rebecca, you're not invading anything. You're creating a new space, one that's yours, different but just as valuable. Is that how you see it? That's how I see it. Catherine will always be their first mother, the one who brought them into the world and loved them in their early years. But you're the one helping them grow and become who they'll be. That's just as important. Thank you for saying that. Sometimes I need to hear that it's okay for me to take this place. More than okay, it's perfect. They sat in silence for a few minutes, enjoying the peace of the night and the feeling that all the pieces of their lives were finally falling into place. Richard, can I ask you something? Always. What do you think Catherine would say about this, about us? The question took Richard by surprise. It was something he had avoided thinking about directly, but knew he'd eventually have to face. You want to know what I really think? I do. I think Catherine would be happy. She always worried about what would happen to us if she wasn't here anymore. And one of the last things she told me was that she wanted me to find love again, that I shouldn't waste the rest of my life carrying guilt. She really said that. She did. And she also said she wanted the kids to have a mother figure who truly loved them, not just someone who took care of them out of obligation. And do you think I truly love them? Rebecca, I see how you look at them, how you care about every detail of their lives, how proud you are of every little achievement they make. That's not obligation, that's genuine maternal love. Sometimes I feel guilty for loving children who aren't biologically mine so much. Why guilty? Because it feels like I'm taking something that doesn't belong to me. Rebecca, love isn't property. Love is a gift. And the fact that you can love someone else's children as if they were your own is a blessing, not an intrusion. Rebecca nestled into Richard's embrace, finally at peace with the feelings she had developed for the family that had become hers. Richard, thank you. For what? For letting me be part of this, for trusting me with the most important people in your life, for giving me the chance to be a mother, even in a non-traditional way. Rebecca, you're not just part of it, you are part of it, and you always will be. The following months were full of adjustments and discoveries. Rebecca kept her own home, but began spending more nights at Richard's. They established family routines that included dinners together, weekend outings, and movie nights with popcorn. The workshop continued to thrive. They had hired 2 more seamstresses from the community, and Junior was developing a line of digital products that was gaining regional recognition. Mr. Thompson, Junior said one afternoon, using the formal address he insisted on keeping, despite Richard's attempts to make him feel more at ease. I wanted to talk to you about an idea. What idea? We could host a weekend workshop to teach others in the community about digital art, like teaching design basics to people who want to learn. That's a great idea. Do you feel ready to teach? I think so. And Aunt Rebecca could teach basic sewing the same day. That way we'd offer a complete package. Let's talk to her about it. When they presented the idea to Rebecca, she was excited. It would be a way to give back to the community for everything we've received, she said. And also a way to build a bigger network of local artisans. Exactly. And who knows, some of the students might eventually join our team. Or start their own businesses, Junior added, like a network of workshops spread across the region. Richard was impressed by the entrepreneurial vision the young man was developing. "Junior, have you ever thought about taking a business course?" "Yeah, but I don't have the money for it." "What if we arranged a scholarship? Or if you took night classes while keeping your job during the day?" "You'd do that for me?" "Of course." Investing in the education of the people who work with us is investing in the future of the business. The prospect of being able to study left Junior visibly emotional. For a young man who had spent years thinking he had no future, the possibility of higher education seemed almost unreal. "Mrs. Jenkins could also take a basic accounting course," Rebecca suggested. "She has a knack for numbers." "We can turn this into a company policy," Richard said, excited about the possibilities. Ongoing education for all associates. Michael and Emily, who were listening to the conversation while doing homework at a nearby table, chimed in. "Dad, can we take classes too?" Emily asked. "What kind of classes?" "Art classes, sewing classes, things we like." "Of course, you can learn anything you want." "I want to learn how to make doll clothes," Emily announced. "And I want to learn how to make more complicated computer drawings," Michael added. "Perfect, Rebecca can teach Emily, and Junior can teach Michael." The idea of everyone in the family learning and teaching each other created an atmosphere of constant growth that was transforming not just the business, but also how they related as a family. 6 months after Richard and Rebecca officially started dating, they were planning a small weekend trip when Michael asked a question that caught them off guard. "Dad, when are you getting married?" "Michael, we never said we were getting married," Richard replied carefully. "But you will, right?" Emily joined in. "Why do you think that?" "Because you love each other, live together, work together, and are happy together. Isn't that what people who get married do?" Michael argued logically. Richard looked at Rebecca, who was clearly trying not to smile. "What do you think about the idea of marriage?" Rebecca asked. "We think it's great," they both answered immediately. "And you don't think it would be weird?" Richard probed. "Weird why?" Emily seemed genuinely confused. "Well, technically, Rebecca would be your stepmom." "Dad, Aunt Rebecca is already our mom in everything but name," Michael said with the frankness typical of children. "Marrying her would just make official what already exists." The observation was so accurate that both Richard and Rebecca were speechless for a moment. "And besides," Emily added, "we'd like to have little siblings." "Emily!" Rebecca exclaimed, blushing. "What?" "It's true. The families at school have lots of kids, it's just the two of us." "And you'd like more siblings?" Richard asked, genuinely curious. "Of course," Michael confirmed. "It'd be cool to teach little kids things. And we could help take care of them," Emily added excitedly. Richard and Rebecca looked at each other, both processing how naturally the children were discussing not just marriage, but also expanding the family. "Kids, these are very important decisions that adults need to make carefully," Rebecca explained. "But will you think about it?" Emily insisted. "We'll talk about it," Richard promised. That night, after the children went to bed, Richard and Rebecca had the most important conversation of their relationship. "Do you really want to marry me?" Richard asked directly. "I do, and you?" "Very much. But I don't want you to feel pressured by the kids' expectations." "Richard, I don't feel pressured. I feel complete. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I should be with the right people doing the right things. And about having more kids, would you like that?" "I always wanted Michael and Emily to have siblings. Catherine and I tried for years before she got sick. And with you, yes, I'd love to. So should we do it?" "Do what? Get married or have kids?" "Both, in the right order." Richard smiled, taking her hands. "Rebecca Marie Davis, will you marry me?" "Just like that? No ring, no flowers, no kneeling?" "I can do all that if you want, but the truth is we've been living like a married couple for months. The formal proposal is just to make official what our hearts have already decided." "Then yes, Richard Thompson, I accept your marriage proposal." They kissed on the balcony under the starlight, sealing not just a romantic commitment, but the definitive union of a family that had formed in an unconventional yet deeply genuine way. The next morning they woke to joyful shouts from the kitchen. Michael and Emily had found a note Richard left on the breakfast table. "Rebecca said, yes, we're getting married. Dad, Aunt Rebecca, Emily yelled, running upstairs. Is it true? It's true, Rebecca confirmed, appearing at the top of the stairs with Richard. The children jumped for joy, hugging the two adults in a whirl of laughter and celebration. When's the wedding? Michael asked eagerly. We still have to decide that, Richard replied. Can it be soon? Emily pleaded. Why the rush? Rebecca laughed. Because I want to wear a beautiful dress that you'll make especially for me. And I want to be the ring bearer, Michael added. Of course you'll both be part of it. You're the most important part of this family. Over breakfast, they began making preliminary plans. They wanted something simple but special. A small ceremony with only the most important people in their lives. Can we have the reception at the workshop? Emily suggested. That way, everyone we love will be in a place that means so. Much to us. That's a wonderful idea, Rebecca agreed. We can decorate the space, make the food we know how to prepare well. And all our friends from the community can join, Michael added. Mrs. Jenkins can make the cake, Emily remembered. She makes the best chocolate cake in the world. And Junior can design the invitations with his drawings, Michael suggested. Richard watched the children's excitement and realized they weren't just envisioning a wedding, but a celebration that would include the entire extended family they'd built around the workshop. You know what? You're both right. That's exactly what we'll do. A reception at the workshop, with all the people who've become important to us. In the days that followed, news of the engagement spread quickly through the workshop community. Mrs. Jenkins cried with joy. Junior immediately offered his artistic services, and the other seamstresses who joined the team began making plans to help with preparations. Rebecca, will you let us make your wedding dress? Asked Susan, one of the most experienced seamstresses. You'd really do that? It would be an honor. You gave us dignified work, taught us new techniques, treated us like family. Making your wedding dress would be our way of giving back. But I want to help too, Emily insisted. Of course, sweetheart. You can embroider some details. What about me? Michael asked. You can help Junior with the invitations and decorations. As wedding preparations took shape, life at the workshop continued to thrive. They'd expanded beyond just clothing and graphic art, now offering regular community classes, a small shop for local handmade goods, and even a co-working space for other small entrepreneurs. Richard, look at this, Rebecca said one afternoon, showing the monthly financial report. We're not just in the black but making enough profit to expand even further. It's incredible. In less than a year, we turned an idea into a thriving business that's benefiting dozens of people. And the best part is we haven't lost the family spirit. Everyone here still feels like part of a community, not just employees. That's what I'm most proud of. We've proven you can run a business ethically and profitably at the same time. Junior, who'd been listening while working on a new design, spoke up. Mr. Richard, can I say something? Of course, Junior. A year ago, I was graffitiing walls and thinking I had no future. Today, I'm finishing high school, taking a technical course, making money from art, and helping other kids in the neighborhood. This feels like a miracle. It's not a miracle, Junior. It's the result of your talent combined with opportunity and a lot of hard work. But if you hadn't believed in me, Junior, I just offered the opportunity. You're the one who did the work. The boy smiled, but Richard could tell there was something else he wanted to say. What is it? Well, I was wondering if I could make a proposal. What kind of proposal? I'd like to open a branch of the workshop in my neighborhood. There are a lot of kids there who could benefit from what I've learned. Here? Rebecca stopped working to pay attention to the conversation. Junior, that's a fantastic idea, she said. Do you feel ready to manage your own space? Richard asked. I think so. I've learned a lot here, and there are other kids in the neighborhood who could work with me. We could focus on urban art and graphic design while you keep the focus on textiles here. And how do you see this working financially? I thought it could be a branch of the company. I'd be the local manager, but still part of the same organizational structure. Richard was impressed by the level of maturity and planning Junior was showing. You know what? Let's seriously consider this possibility. Can you put together a basic business plan and present it to all of us? Really? Junior's eyes lit up. Really? If it works out, it'll be another step in expanding what we're building here. Michael and Emily, who were doing homework, at a nearby table chimed in. Dad, if Junior opens a branch, can we help there too? Emily asked. Maybe on weekends, Richard considered. It'd be a good way for you to learn about different aspects of the business. And when we grow up, can we open other branches? Michael asked hopefully. Michael, are you already thinking of being a businessman? Rebecca smiled. I am. I want to be like Dad and Aunt Rebecca. Create businesses that help people. That's a very noble ambition, Richard said proudly. And I want to be a fashion designer, Emily announced. I want to make beautiful clothes like Aunt Rebecca. So you two will carry on the workshop's legacy, Rebecca observed, warmly. The conversation about the future was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Jenkins, who looked worried. Rebecca, we need to talk, she said. What's wrong, Mrs. Jenkins? It's about the wedding. I had a visit today that left me concerned. What kind of visit? Some men came asking about you, said they were from the press, and wanted to do a story on the millionaire businessman who married the maid. Richard felt a knot in his stomach. He had hoped they could keep their private life away from media attention. What did you tell them? I said I had no comment and closed the door, but they kept snooping around the neighborhood, asking the neighbors questions. What kind of questions? Rebecca asked anxiously. They wanted to know about your life before working for Mr. Richard, if you had other relationships, debts, things like that. Richard clenched his fists, feeling anger rise in his chest. Rebecca, I'm so sorry. I didn't think this would happen. It's not your fault. You're a public figure. It's natural there'd be interest. But they shouldn't be digging into your private life like this. Junior, who had listened to the whole conversation, spoke up. Mr. Richard, can I suggest something? Tell, of course. What if you controlled the narrative? Instead of letting others tell the story, you tell it yourselves. How do you mean? Do an interview or press conference explaining the truth about how you met and fell in love. That way, there's no room for speculation. That's a good idea, Rebecca agreed. Better to explain the real situation than let them make up stories. But are you comfortable with this? Richard asked worriedly. Once we do this, our private life won't be private anymore. Richard, our life isn't private anymore. Reporters are already digging around. At least this way we can make sure the truth gets told. Michael and Emily, who had stayed quiet the whole conversation, finally spoke up. Dad, does this mean we'll be on TV? Emily asked, excitedly. Maybe, sweetheart, would that make you nervous? A little, Michael admitted. But if it's to protect our family, I think we should do it. You two are very mature, Rebecca said proudly. We learned from you and Dad, Emily replied simply. Richard felt moved by the children's maturity, but also worried about how the exposure might affect them. All right, he decided. We'll schedule an interview with a trusted journalist. We'll tell our story our way. 2 days later, they welcomed a reporter from the local television station for an interview in the workshop itself. Richard had chosen that location because it represented the essence of the transformation they had all gone through. Mr. Thompson, the reporter began, there are rumors that you became romantically involved with a former employee. Is that true? It's true, but that description oversimplifies things, Richard answered calmly. Rebecca was never just an employee. She became part of our family long before we fell in love. How did that happen? Rebecca was hired to care for my children after my wife passed away, but I quickly realized she offered much more than basic care. She brought joy, emotional stability, and wisdom into our home. The reporter turned to Rebecca. Mrs. Davis, how do you see this situation? Don't you feel intimidated by the social differences between you? Look, around, Rebecca gestured to the workshop. This wasn't Richard giving me charity. It was a real partnership. I contributed talent and hard work. He contributed resources and business experience. Together, we created something neither of us could have done alone. What about the children? How did they react to your relationship? Michael and Emily, who were present for the interview, spoke up. Aunt Rebecca was already like a mother to us before they started dating, Emily explained. The relationship just made official what was already there. And you don't feel like she's replacing your biological mother? No, Michael answered firmly. Mum will always be our first mother, but Aunt Rebecca is our second mother. Both are important, each in their own way. The reporter seemed impressed by the children's clarity. And the future? What are your plans? We're getting married soon, Richard announced, and we'll keep expanding the workshop. Our goal is to create opportunities for more people in the community to develop their talents. Some critics say this is just a marketing move, that you're using the romantic story to improve your public image. Those people are free to their opinions, Rebecca replied with dignity. But I suggest they come here and talk to the people who work with us. Let them see the lives that have been changed. Let them see how Richard treats everyone with respect and creates real opportunities for growth. Mr. Thompson, have your priorities changed since meeting Rebecca? Completely. I've learned that success isn't just about accumulating wealth. Success is about creating value for others, building genuine relationships, and leaving a positive legacy. And isn't that just romanticism? In practice, how does it work? In practice, it means I now work fewer hours, but more focused. I spend more time with my family. I invest in projects with positive social impact, even when the financial return is smaller. Junior, who had been invited to join the interview, added, "Can I speak as someone who benefited from this change? A year ago, I was at the police station for graffitiing. Today, I'm finishing high school, working as a graphic designer, and planning to open my own branch of the workshop. This isn't marketing, it's real transformation." The interview aired 3 days later and had a very positive response. Instead of focusing on the sensationalism of Millionaire and Nanny, the media highlighted the story of social and family transformation. "Did you see?" Mrs. Jenkins said excitedly, holding up the local newspaper. "There's a beautiful article about you all, and there's a photo of the workshop. And there's a photo of me too," Emily cheered, seeing her own picture in the paper. "We're famous. The important thing is that the real story was told," Richard said, relieved. But the media exposure brought unexpected consequences. In the following days, the workshop received dozens of calls. Some were from clients interested in the products, others from people wanting to know about classes, and some from other businessmen interested in partnerships. "Rebecca, you won't believe it," Susan said excitedly. "A department store in New York City wants to place an order for 100 pieces. 100 pieces? Rebecca looked shocked. "We don't have the capacity to produce that much in such a short time." "Then let's expand," Richard suggested. "We'll hire more people, buy more equipment. But I don't want to lose the quality or the handmade spirit of what we do." "We won't lose it. We'll grow while keeping the same values." Junior, who had been listening, made a suggestion. "What if we split the production, the part of the order that's graphic art? I can coordinate with other young people I know. That way we distribute the work and create more opportunities." "That's an excellent idea," Rebecca agreed. "We can turn this into a collaborative production network." Over the next few weeks, they organized themselves to meet the growing demand without losing the essence of the project. They hired more people from the neighborhood, formed partnerships with other local artisans, and established strict quality standards. "You know what impresses me the most?" Richard remarked during a planning meeting. "We're growing, but everyone here still treats each other like family." "That's because it really is family," Mrs. Jenkins observed. "Family isn't just blood, it's choice, affection, mutual care." "And speaking of family," Emily interrupted, "when's the wedding? You keep talking about business." "And forget the most important thing." Everyone laughed at the girl's interruption. "Emily's right," Rebecca admitted. "With all this rush, we kind of forgot to set a final date." "How about next month?" Richard suggested. "We've already been through all the recent turbulence, the business is stable." "And I've already finished my dress," one of the seamstresses announced proudly. "Really?" Rebecca was thrilled. "Can I see?" "Only on the wedding day, it's a surprise." "And the invitations are ready," Junior added. "I made a special design with drawings of all of us." "And I've already spoken to the priest," Mrs. Jenkins informed them. "He said he can hold the ceremony right here in the workshop." "You all planned everything without consulting us?" Richard asked, amused. "We planned it so you wouldn't have an excuse to postpone again," Emily explained with the honesty of children. "Then it's decided." Rebecca smiled. "Wedding next Saturday." The following week was filled with intense preparations. The workshop had been transformed into a combination of workspace and banquet hall. Junior coordinated the decorations, Mrs. Jenkins organized the feast, and the seamstresses finished not only Rebecca's dress, but also special outfits for all the participants. "Dad, I'm nervous," Michael confessed the day before the wedding. "Nervous about what, son? What if something goes wrong? What if Aunt Rebecca changes her mind?" "Michael, look at her," Richard pointed to Rebecca, who was across the workshop helping with the final decorative touches. "Does she look like someone who's going to change her mind?" Michael watched Rebecca, radiant and laughing, with the other women clearly happy and excited. "No, she looks like the happiest person in the world." "Exactly, and do you know why? Because we've all ended up exactly where we're supposed to be." "With who we're supposed to be with," Emily corrected, appearing beside them. "That's right, Princess, with who we're supposed to be with." On the morning of the wedding, Richard woke up early and stepped onto the porch of the house. He looked out at the garden where Catherine used to plant flowers and felt a deep peace in his heart. "Thank you," he whispered into the air, "for teaching me how to love, for giving me these wonderful children, and for allowing me to love again." A gentle breeze rustled the trees, and Richard had the sense that Catherine was there, approving of his choices and blessing his future. Michael and Emily appeared on the porch, already dressed for the wedding. "Dad, are you okay?" Emily asked. "I'm great, sweetheart. I was just thanking Mum for everything she taught us." "Is she happy for you?" Michael asked. "I'm sure she is. She always wanted us to be happy." "And we are, aren't we?" Emily smiled. "We're very happy," Richard confirmed, hugging his children. A few hours later, the workshop was completely transformed. Flowers everywhere, tables carefully decorated, and an improvised altar where the priest waited. All their friends from the community were there, along with some of Richard's business associates who had grown genuinely interested in the workshop's social project. When Rebecca appeared in the dress made by her co-workers, a murmur of admiration filled the room. The dress was simple yet elegant, with delicate hand-embroidered details that told the story of her and Richard's journey. "My God, Rebecca," Richard whispered as she reached the altar. "You're beautiful." "Thank you. You all look wonderful too." She smiled at him, Michael, and Emily, who stood beside their father as attendants. The ceremony was simple but moving. The priest spoke about love that transforms, about families built not just by blood but by choice, and about the importance of creating communities based on mutual care. "Richard," the priest said, "do you take Rebecca to be your wife, promising to love, respect, and care for her in all moments of your lives?" "I do," Richard answered firmly. "Rebecca, do you take Richard to be your husband, promising to love, respect, and care for him in all moments of your lives?" "I do," Rebecca said, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "And you, Michael and Emily," the priest addressed the children, "do you accept Rebecca as a second mother, promising to love and respect her as part of your family?" "We do," they answered in unison, making everyone laugh. "And you, Rebecca, do you accept Michael and Emily as children of your heart, promising to care for them, guide them, and love them as if they were your own?" "I do with all my heart," Rebecca said, kneeling to hug the children. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Even Junior, who usually kept a reserved demeanor, was visibly moved. "Then, by the authority granted to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife, a family united. Richard, you may kiss the bride." The kiss was followed by enthusiastic applause and shouts of joy. The children threw themselves into their parents' arms, creating a family hug that symbolized the final union of all the pieces of their lives. The party that followed was exactly as they had dreamed, intimate, warm, and full of genuine love. Mrs. Jenkins had made a 3-tiered cake that was an edible work of art. Junior had created a video with photos of their journey, from Rebecca's first day as a nanny to that very moment. "I'd like to make a toast," Richard said, calling for everyone's attention. 2 years ago, I was a lost man. I had a lot of money but little purpose. Wonderful children, but I didn't know how to connect with them. Professional success but emotional emptiness." He looked at Rebecca, radiant by his side. "Then this extraordinary woman came into our lives, Not only did she bring love and care to my children, but she taught me that true success is about creating value for others. She showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice and commitment. He gestured to the entire group gathered there. And look at what we've built together. Not just a marriage, but a community. Not just a business, but a network of opportunities. Not just a family, but proof that positive change is possible when we combine talent and goodwill. So my toast is to Rebecca, who transformed all our lives, to Michael and Emily, who taught me that love doesn't shrink when shared, it multiplies. And to all of you, who've proven that family is who we choose to have beside us on life's journey. Cheers! Everyone shouted in unison, raising their glasses. During the party, Richard took a few moments to speak individually with people who had been important in their journey. Junior, he said, finding the young man organizing sound equipment, I want to thank you. Thank me for what, Mr. Thompson? For showing me that investing in people is worth more than any financial investment. You've gone from a lost boy to a young entrepreneur, and that made me believe it's possible to make a real difference in people's lives. Mr. Thompson, without your opportunity, I'd probably be in jail or worse by now. Thank you for believing in me when even I didn't believe in myself. And now, still want to open the branch in your neighborhood? More than ever. In fact, I've already found 5 young people who'd like to join. And I spoke with a community center that might lend us space. Then let's make it happen. Monday, we'll start working on the detailed plan. Mrs. Jenkins approached them, carrying a tray of sweets. Mr. Thompson, can I say something? Of course, Mrs. Jenkins. In all my years, I've never seen such a beautiful transformation. You took people who were lost and built a family. That's God's work. Mrs. Jenkins, we just created opportunities. The people did the work of transformation. No, sir, everyone offers opportunities. You offered love, respect, and hope. That's much rarer. Michael and Emily approached, interrupting the conversation. Dad, can we give the speech we prepared? Emily asked. Of course, sweetheart. The children stood in the center of the room, asking for everyone's attention. We want to say something, Michael began. 2 years ago, we lost our mom, and we thought we'd never be happy again. Then Aunt Rebecca came, Emily continued. At first, we thought she was just another nanny, but she was so much more. She taught us how to sew, cook, and draw. But most of all, she taught us that it's possible to love again without forgetting who we lost. And she also taught our dad how to be a real dad, Emily added. Before, he worked all the time. Now he has dinner with us, helps with homework, and plays with us. So we want to thank our new mom for giving us a complete family again, Michael said, looking directly at Rebecca. And our dad for being brave enough to love again, Emily added. And all of you for being our extended family, they said together, gesturing to everyone present. Once again, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Rebecca knelt to hug the children, whispering thank you through tears of happiness. As the night went on, the party gradually turned into a more intimate celebration. Guests slowly began to leave until only the closest family remained. Dad, this was the best day of my life, Emily said, leaning against Richard's shoulder. Mine too, Princess. And now we're an official family? Michael asked. Now we're an official family, Rebecca confirmed. Forever. And will we have little siblings soon? Emily asked hopefully. Emily, Richard laughed. One thing at a time. But we will, right? She insisted. God willing, yes, Rebecca replied diplomatically. I hope we have at least 2, Michael said. That way we can teach them so many things. We'll see, son, we'll see. When they finally got home that night, Richard and Rebecca sat on the porch to process everything that had happened. How are you feeling? He asked. Complete, she answered without hesitation. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, with the right people doing the right things. Me too. And you know what amazes me the most? What? How everything fell perfectly into place. The workshop, our family, the community. We've built. It's like all the pieces of a giant puzzle finally found their spots. Do you think Catherine would approve? I'm sure she would. She always said true love isn't possessive, it's freeing. And today, I felt like she was there, blessing our union. Thank you for letting me be part of her story too, for not treating me like a replacement, but as a continuation. Rebecca, You're not a continuation or a replacement. You're a new chapter, a beautiful one, full of hope and possibilities. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the stars and mentally planning their future. Richard, can I tell you a secret? Of course. When I was little, I used to dream about the perfect wedding. A beautiful dress, a big party, a prince charming. And how was today compared to that dream? So it was 1,000 times better, because it wasn't about fantasy. It was about real love, real family, real community. It was about building something together, not just celebrating a moment. And do you regret anything? The only thing I regret is taking so long to let myself believe I deserved this happiness. In the months following the wedding, the life of the Thompson-Davis family, they had decided to combine their last names, continued to evolve in surprising and rewarding ways. The workshop expanded to 3 locations: the original, which remained, the Operations Center, Junior's branch in the outer neighborhood, specializing in urban art and graphic design, and a new downtown space that served as a showroom and concept store. Rebecca, have you seen the numbers from last quarter? Richard said one morning, showing the financial reports. I can't believe it. We tripled our revenue in 6 months. And the best part, we created 42 direct and indirect jobs. 42 families with better opportunities, Rebecca corrected, always focusing on the human side of the numbers. Junior had not only become a capable manager, but also a respected community leader. His branch was helping at-risk youth and turning talent into professional opportunities. Mr. Richard, he said during a monthly meeting, I'd like to propose a new project. What kind of project? An arts and crafts school, where we teach not just techniques, but also entrepreneurship, basic administration, digital marketing. A school that trains not just artisans, but small business owners, Rebecca added, excited by the idea. Exactly. This way we multiply our social impact far beyond our workshops. Junior, that's a fantastic idea, Richard approved. Let's study the feasibility and look for partnerships with educational institutions. Michael and Emily, now 9 years old, had become little entrepreneurs. Emily had created a line of doll clothes that was a hit among her school friends. Michael developed simple digital games that combined fun with teaching basic design concepts. Dad, can I open a bank account? Emily asked during dinner. A bank account? What for? To save the money I'm making from the doll clothes. I want to save up for my own sewing machine. And I want to save for a better computer, Michael added, so I can make more complex games. Are you serious about these projects? Rebecca asked, impressed. Very serious, they replied in unison. Then here's what we'll do, Richard decided. You can open bank accounts, but with a few conditions. First, you have to keep doing well in school. Second, you need to divide your money, part for saving, part for spending, and part to donate to those in need. Donate? Emily asked. Yes. When we're lucky enough to earn money, it's important to help those who haven't had the same opportunities. Can I donate art supplies for poor kids? Michael suggested. Can I donate fabric for women who want to learn to sew? Emily added. Those are perfect ideas, Rebecca approved. The children's involvement in the family's social projects was fostering a sense of social responsibility that Richard and Rebecca hoped would last a lifetime. 6 months after the wedding, Rebecca made an announcement that sent the whole family into a frenzy. I have some news to share, she said during breakfast. What news? Michael asked curiously. Well, in a few months our family is going to grow. Richard nearly choked on his coffee. Rebecca, are you? I'm pregnant, she confirmed, beaming. The reaction was immediate. Emily shrieked with joy. Michael jumped from his chair to hug Rebecca, and Richard sat silently for a few seconds, processing the news, before standing to embrace his wife. Really? He asked, emotional. Very much so. The doctor confirmed it. Yesterday. I'm going to be a big sister, Emily shouted. We're going to be big siblings, Michael corrected, and we'll teach the baby everything we know. First, we'll find out if it's a boy or a girl, Rebecca laughed. It doesn't matter, Emily said firmly. We'll love the baby just the same. And we'll always protect them, Michael added seriously. Richard watched the scene with his heart overflowing with happiness. 2 years ago, he was a lost man, focused only on work, struggling to connect with his children. Now he was married to an extraordinary woman, had a close-knit family, a thriving business making a difference in the community, and soon another child. "Rebecca," he said, pulling her into a hug. "Thank you." "For what?" "For turning our house into a family. For teaching me that real success is love, connection, and purpose. For giving me the chance to be a father again, this time doing things right from the start." "Richard, we did this together. Everyone contributed to building this beautiful family." In the following months, Rebecca's pregnancy became a community celebration. The seamstresses at the workshop prepared the layette, Mrs. Jenkins offered. To be a surrogate grandmother, Junior created special designs to decorate the baby's room, and Michael and Emily took turns as personal assistants to the expectant mother. "Aunt Rebecca, can the baby hear yet?" Emily asked, pressing her ear against Rebecca's belly. "Yes, he can. That's why your dad and you all talk to him every day." "So he already knows our voices?" "He does. And when he's born, he'll recognize you as his siblings." "That's so cool," Michael cheered. "We'll be the first people he meets besides you two." The preparations for the baby's arrival also included adjustments to the workshop's organization. Rebecca trained other seamstresses to temporarily take over her duties during maternity leave, and Richard rearranged his schedule to be more present during the child's first months. "This time I'll do things differently," he confessed to Rebecca one afternoon. "Different how?" "With Michael and Emily, I was so focused on work that I missed many important moments. Their first steps, first words, first discoveries. I won't make the same mistake." "Richard, you were a different father back then because you were dealing with Catherine's loss and trying to keep the family financially stable. Don't blame yourself for the choices you made with the information you had at the time. Even so, I want to be more present now. I want to be part of every important moment, and you will. We'll do it together." In December, on a cold but sunny morning, Rebecca went into labor. Richard took her to the hospital, accompanied by Michael and Emily, who insisted on coming along to meet their baby brother as soon as he was born. "Dad, are you nervous?" Michael asked in the waiting room. "A little," Richard admitted. "What about you two?" "Excited," Emily replied. "I can't wait to hold the baby." "And teach him things," Michael added. Mrs. Jenkins, Junior, and several people from the workshop had gathered at the hospital to await the arrival of the newest family member. "It's amazing how loved this child already is by so many people," Mrs. Jenkins observed. "It's because this family is special," Junior said. "They turn everyone who enters their lives into family too." After 8 hours of labor, at 6 in the evening, Gabriel Thompson Davis was born, a healthy boy weighing 7.5 pounds with his mother's eyes and his father's stubborn chin. When Richard stepped out of the delivery room to announce his son's arrival, he was met with applause and tears of joy. "It's a boy," he shouted. "Gabriel, mother and baby are doing well." Michael and Emily rushed to hug their father. "Can we see him?" Emily asked eagerly. "Soon, once Rebecca is settled in her room." "Who does he look like?" Michael wanted to know. "He looks like you two when you were babies. But he's got his own features too. You'll love him." An hour later, the whole family was gathered in the hospital room. Rebecca, tired but radiant, held Gabriel in her arms while Michael and Emily watched in awe. "He's so tiny," Emily whispered. "And so perfect," Michael added. "Do you want to hold him?" Rebecca offered. "Can we?" they asked, in unison. With care and supervision, each of them had a chance to hold their baby brother. The moment was captured in dozens of photos that would become precious family memories. "Welcome to the family, Gabriel," Emily said solemnly. "We'll take care of you forever and teach you everything we know," Michael promised. Richard watched the scene with an overflowing heart. There was his complete family: Rebecca, the woman who had transformed his life; Michael and Emily, who had grown and matured so remarkably; and now Gabriel, who represented not just a new beginning but the final consolidation of the family they had built together. "Rebecca," he said softly, "thank you for giving me this perfect family." "Thank you for building this family with me," she replied. In the days that followed, Gabriel's arrival was celebrated by the entire workshop community. The seamstresses threw a surprise party. Junior created a special commemorative illustration, and regular clients sent gifts and congratulatory cards. It's amazing how our personal and professional lives have intertwined so naturally, Rebecca remarked as she nursed Gabriel. That's because they were never truly separate, Richard observed. From the beginning, our family was built around the values of care, respect, and mutual growth, the same principles that guide the workshop. And now Gabriel will grow up already part of this community, Michael said, gently stroking his baby brother's head. He'll learn to sew, to draw, to do business, all of it together, Emily added. He's going to be the most talented baby in the world, Mrs. Jenkins declared proudly. 6 months after Gabriel's birth, the family received news that filled them with pride and emotion. The workshop project had been selected for a municipal award in social entrepreneurship. I can't believe it, Rebecca exclaimed when Richard read the official announcement. You deserve it, Junior said. What you've created here has changed the lives of dozens of families. What we've created, Richard corrected. This award belongs to all of us. The award ceremony was scheduled for a month later, and they decided the entire workshop team would attend. We'll all go together, Rebecca declared, as a family. And Gabriel too, Emily asked. Of course. As part of the team, Richard laughed. He might cry during the ceremony, Michael noted worriedly. If he does, we'll step out quietly, Rebecca reassured him, but it's important he's there. One day he'll understand he was part of this story from the very beginning. The night of the ceremony was emotional. Richard gave a speech on behalf of the team, speaking about how small actions can create big transformations when driven by genuine love and commitment to the community. This award isn't ours, he said on stage. It belongs to every person who believed it was possible to create opportunities where there were once only hardships, to every artisan who turned talent into livelihood, to every family that found hope where there was once despair. But most of all, it belongs to an extraordinary woman who taught me that true success isn't measured by what we accumulate, but by how much we contribute to the growth of others. Rebecca, thank you for transforming not just my life, but the life of an entire community. The applause was deafening. Rebecca, standing beside her husband on stage with Gabriel in her arms, and Michael and Emily at her sides, perfectly embodied what they had built, a family founded on love, respect, and shared purpose. After the ceremony, during the reception, they were approached by several people interested in replicating the workshop model in other communities. Would you consider expanding to other cities? Asked a businesswoman from a nearby town. Not exactly expanding, Rebecca replied, but we can teach the methodology and support the creation of similar projects tailored to local needs. That's exactly what we want to do, Richard added. Not create a franchise, but inspire and support local initiatives. It'd be like planting seeds, Junior observed poetically. Each one will grow according to the soil it's planted in. The idea of spreading the workshop model while preserving local essence became the family's next big project. They began developing a mentorship and consulting program to help other communities create their own workshops. Just imagine, Rebecca said excitedly during a planning meeting, dozens of workshops spread across the United States, each adapted to the local culture and needs, but all based on the same principles of respect, opportunity, and mutual growth. It would be like a network of social transformation, Michael observed, impressing the adults with his understanding of the project. And each workshop would be independent but connected to the others, Emily added. You two have an incredible vision for 9-year-olds, Mrs. Jenkins commented proudly. We learned from you, Michael replied simply. A year after Gabriel's birth, the family had settled into a balanced routine that combined family life, meaningful work, and personal growth. The original workshop remained prosperous. Junior's branch had become a reference for urban art in the region, and they were already mentoring the creation of workshops in 5 different cities. You know what amazes me most about all this? Richard said one evening as he watched Rebecca giving Gabriel a bath. What? How naturally we've become a family that works together, grows together, and dreams together. It's not just that we live in the same house or work in the same place. It's that we've truly built a shared life. It's because from the start we treated each other as family, not as employees or outsiders, Rebecca observed. And because everyone has a voice in important decisions, Michael added, stepping into the bathroom to help with Gabriel. And because no one here is more important than anyone else, Emily finished, appearing as well. Gabriel, now 1-year-old and taking his first steps and saying his first words, watched his whole family gathered around him and clapped his hands in joy. "Mama," he said clearly, reaching his little arms out to Rebecca. "And Dada," he turned to Richard. "Miga, Fia." He tried to say his siblings' names, making everyone laugh. "He's trying to say Michael and Emily," Rebecca translated. "Soon enough he'll be talking to us about workshop projects," Michael joked. "And giving opinions on design," Emily added. "Who knows? Maybe he'll be the next entrepreneur in the family," Richard speculated. "Or an artist," Rebecca suggested. "Or whatever he wants to be," they all said together in sync, showing just how connected they were as a family. That night, after the children went to bed, Richard and Rebecca sat on the porch for their traditional evening chat. "How do you feel about these past 2 years?" he asked. "They've been the most transformative years of my life," she replied. "Not just because I got married and had a child, but because I discovered who I really am when given opportunities to grow." "And who did you discover you are?" "A stronger, more creative, more capable woman than I ever imagined. A businesswoman, a mother, a wife, a community leader, things I never dreamed I'd be." "And what do you think comes next?" "More growth, more challenges, more opportunities to make a difference," she smiled. "And you? How do you feel about the years ahead?" "Excited to live every moment. For the first time in a long while, I wake up every day eager for what the day holds. Even with all the responsibilities, the workshop, mentoring other projects, 3 kids, especially because of the responsibilities. Because now, they're responsibilities I've consciously chosen, ones that make sense, to me that align with my values. And you don't miss the simpler life from before?" "Rebecca, my life before wasn't simple. It was empty. I worked 14 hours a day to escape the emptiness. Now I work 10 hours a day because I love what I do, and because it's building something important. That's a significant difference, and exactly. It's the difference between surviving and living." 2 years later, the Thompson-Davis family had become a benchmark for social entrepreneurship in the region. The workshop model had been replicated in 15 cities, creating a network of over 300 direct jobs and benefiting thousands of people indirectly. Michael and Emily, now 11 years old, had developed their own small businesses. Emily designed and sold doll clothes and children's accessories, while Michael created simple educational apps that taught basic art and design concepts to kids. "Dad, can I make a suggestion?" Emily said during dinner. "Of course, sweetheart. We could create a program to teach other kids how to run businesses, just like we teach adults at the workshop. A children's entrepreneurship school," Michael added, "where kids learn early on that they can create solutions to problems and even make money from it." "It would be like the workshop, but focused on encouraging business creativity from a young age," Emily explained. Richard and Rebecca exchanged glances, once again impressed by their children's maturity and vision. "Have you thought about how this would work in practice?" Rebecca asked. "We have," they both replied excitedly. "It would be on weekends," Michael explained. "Kids aged 8 to 12 learn to identify problems, create solutions, make simple products, and sell them to family and friends. And part of the money they earn goes to them, part gets saved and part gets donated to social projects," Emily added. "Just like you taught us," Michael finished. "And who would be the teacher?" Richard asked, already guessing the answer. "Us," Emily said proudly. "We'll teach what we learned from you." "With adult supervision, of course," Michael quickly added. Gabriel, now 3 years old and already speaking in full sentences, chimed in from his high chair at the dinner table. "I want to teach too." "Gabriel, you're still too little," Emily laughed. "But I can help," he insisted. "Of course you can, Gabriel," Rebecca said warmly. "You can be our special assistant." "I like that idea," he cheered, clapping his hands. The children's entrepreneurship school became a reality 6 months later. They started with 10 kids from the neighborhood, meeting on Saturdays at the workshop for 3-hour sessions that combined basic theory with hands-on activities. "Look at this," Rebecca said to Richard during one of the first classes. "Michael is teaching an 8-year-old girl how to calculate production costs, and Emily is helping a 9-year-old boy create a brand for his product. And Gabriel is handing out pencils and paper like it's the most important job in the world," Richard chuckled, watching their youngest. They were truly born for this. Or they learned it from our example, which is even better. The impact of the children's entrepreneurship program was immediate. Parents began reporting changes in their kids' behavior, more creativity in solving problems, greater responsibility with money, and an interest in helping others. "Mrs. Jenkins," said one of the students' mothers, "my daughter woke me up early today with an idea to help orphaned kids. She wants to organize a fair with products made by the children in the program to raise money for an orphanage." "What a wonderful idea," Rebecca said excitedly. "We'll support it completely." And it wasn't just her. The kids organized and decided this together. They're learning not just how to run a business, but how to do it with a social purpose. "This is exactly what we hoped for," Richard said proudly. The charity fair organized by the children was an absolute success. They sold products they had created, from cookies and cakes to small decorations and custom drawings. The money raised was enough to buy school supplies for 50 underprivileged children. "Dad, this is better than any toy," Emily said at the end of the event. "Why?" "Because we helped real people. We made a difference in other kids' lives. And we learned that working together is better than working alone," Michael added. "And that sharing is more fun than keeping everything for ourselves," Gabriel chimed in, even though he was still too young to fully grasp the concept. That night, Richard reflected on the extraordinary journey his family had taken. It had started with a simple invitation to dinner at the Nanny's house and turned into a complete revolution of values and priorities. "Rebecca," he said, "do you remember when we first talked about our feelings?" "I do. You said you were afraid of ruining what we had by trying to turn it into romance. And you were afraid of getting too attached to something that might be temporary. What an irony, huh? Our fears were the exact opposite of what happened." "How so?" "You thought romantic love could destroy our partnership. Instead, it strengthened everything. And I thought I was getting too attached to something temporary. Turns out I was attaching myself to something permanent and real. It's amazing how life surprises us when we make decisions based on love instead of fear. And how every brave choice opens doors to possibilities we couldn't even imagine." 5 years after their marriage, the Thompson-Davis family had become a national reference in family social entrepreneurship. The workshop model had been replicated in over 50 cities. The children's entrepreneurship program was running in 20 different locations, and they had been invited to speak at universities and business events about social and family sustainability. Michael and Emily, now 14, had developed an app connecting young entrepreneurs from different cities, allowing them to exchange experiences and collaborate on projects. Gabriel, at 6, already showed interest in both art and business, actively participating in family discussions about their projects. "Mom, Dad," Michael said during a family meeting, "Emily and I had an idea." "What idea?" Rebecca asked. "We want to go to college out of town, but not to run away from what we've built here, to learn things that can contribute even more to our projects. I want to study design and sustainability," Emily explained, "to create products that are beautiful, functional, and eco-friendly. And I want to study social technology," Michael added, "to develop digital tools that help projects like ours grow and connect." "Have you thought about which universities?" Richard asked. "We've considered several options, but the important thing is we want to come back. We want to use what we learn to make our workshop network grow even bigger. And I'll stay here to take care of everything while they're studying," Gabriel declared seriously, making everyone laugh. "Gabriel, you'll be studying too," Rebecca chuckled. "But yes, you'll be here to carry on the family's work. And when you come back, we'll have the biggest social transformation project in the country," Gabriel said excitedly. The prospect of seeing their children grow and take on even greater responsibilities in the family project filled Richard and Rebecca with pride and emotion. "You know what this means, right?" Rebecca said. "It means we've raised a family that not only loves each other, but also shares values and purpose." "It means what we've built here will continue after us," Richard added. "And it'll grow in ways we can't even imagine," Emily said. "Because each generation will add their own ideas and talents," Michael concluded. "It's like a tree," Gabriel observed poetically. "We planted the seed, you grew as branches, and your children will be the leaves and fruits." The 6-year-old's analogy was so perfect that everyone fell silent for a moment, absorbing the depth of his words. "Gabriel, that was beautiful," Rebecca said, hugging her youngest son. "I learned from you," he replied simply. At that moment, Richard fully understood what they had created. It wasn't just a thriving business or a happy family. It was a legacy of values, a way of life that could endure for generations, positively, impacting hundreds, maybe even thousands of people over time. 10 years after that first dinner in Rebecca's modest home, Richard found himself at another dinner table, this time in a house designed specifically for their extended family. The table seated 12, and it was often filled with members of their workshop team, friends from the community, and visitors who came to learn about their project. Michael and Emily had returned from college with degrees and revolutionary ideas. Michael had developed a digital platform connecting workshops worldwide, allowing for the exchange of techniques, products, and cultural experiences. Emily had created a line of sustainable products that was gaining international recognition. Gabriel, now 9, already showed a unique blend of artistic sensitivity and business vision, actively participating in family decisions and contributing creative ideas to their projects. "Dad, Mom," Gabriel said during a family dinner, "I have a surprise for you." "What surprise?" Rebecca asked curiously. "I wrote an essay at school about our family, and my teacher said it was the best in the class. Can I read it to you?" "Of course, son," Richard encouraged. Gabriel stood up, took a paper from his pocket and began to read. "My family is different from most families I know, not because we're rich or famous, but because we chose to live in a special way. My dad used to work too much and didn't know how to be a good father. My mom wasn't our real mom at first, but she became our mom in heart. My older siblings were abandoned by their birth mother when they were babies, but they never felt abandoned because they found a family that chose them. Our family isn't just made by blood, it's made by choices. Every day we choose to love each other, take care of each other, work together, and help others find their own families. My dad always says that real family is the one who stands by you in hard times and celebrates your victories as if they were their own. My mom always says that love doesn't shrink when it's shared. It grows. Our work is different too. We don't just work to make money. We work to help others discover their talents and build better lives for themselves. A lot of people ask if it isn't tiring to mix family and work. But for us, it's natural because our family and our work share the same values: respect, love, growth, and caring for others. When I grow up, I want to continue my family's work, not because I have to, but because I believe it's the most important thing I can do: help people find their own paths to happiness. My family taught me that true happiness doesn't come from having things, but from having people we love and knowing we're making a difference in others' lives. So when people ask me what my family is like, I always say, it's a family that chooses to become family every single day. When Gabriel finished reading, there wasn't a dry eye at the table. Rebecca was openly crying. Richard was visibly emotional, and Michael and Emily were proud of their little brother. "Gabriel," Rebecca said with a choked voice, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." "And the truest," Richard added. "You managed to explain in just a few words what took us years to build. And you made me understand even better why our family is special," Emily said. "You have an incredible talent with words," Michael observed. "Maybe you'll be a writer when you grow up. Or maybe I'll be everything: a writer, a businessman, an artist." Gabriel smiled. "I learned from you that I don't have to choose just one thing." That night, after the children went to sleep, Richard and Rebecca sat on the porch for their traditional evening talk, now 10 years into their marriage. "How do you feel knowing we managed to create this?" Richard asked. gesturing to the house full of life, love, and purpose. Grateful, fulfilled, and most of all, hopeful about the future, Rebecca answered. And you? At peace. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, with the right people by my side. And when you look at the years ahead, I see continuous growth. The projects expanding, the children maturing and taking on more responsibilities, our family continuing to be an example that it's possible to live differently. And you're not afraid something might go wrong? I feel like if something does go wrong, we'll face it together. We've built a strong enough foundation to weather any storm. And if you could go back in time and change something, I'd only change one thing. I'd have started this journey sooner. But then I realized maybe we weren't ready before. Maybe we needed to go through all those earlier experiences to be ready to build this. I think you're right. I needed the experience of caring for my grandmother to know how to care for a family. You needed the pain of loss to appreciate what you had. The children needed the experience of growing up in a blended family to understand that love is a choice, not just biology. And now we're all ready for the next phase. What's the next phase? Watching our children become adults who carry on these values, seeing the workshops spread across the country, watching Gabriel grow up in this environment of love and purpose from the start, and who knows, maybe seeing grandchildren who'll grow up already knowing that family is about love, respect, and contributing to the world. That would be the perfect closing of the circle, Richard smiled. 15 years after that first dinner, the Thompson-Davis family had become one of the leading references in family social entrepreneurship in the United States. Michael, now 26, led the company's social technology division, having developed platforms that connected similar projects in 3 countries. Emily, also 26, had created a sustainable product brand recognized internationally, but kept its production rooted in the family's network of workshops. Gabriel, at 16, already showed impressive maturity and business vision, actively participating in the company's strategic decisions and developing his own social impact projects. "Dad, Mom," Gabriel said during a family meeting, "I want to propose something to you." "What is it, son?" Rebecca asked. "I think it's time for you to step back from day-to-day operations and take on a more strategic, mentoring role." Richard and Rebecca looked at each other in surprise. "Retire?" Richard asked. "Gabriel, we're only in our early 50s. "Not retire for good," Gabriel clarified, "but stop working 12-hour days and start traveling across the country and the world, teaching others how to replicate what you've built here." "That's an interesting idea," Emily said. "You've already done the hardest part, which was creating and establishing the model. Now you can focus on multiplying the impact. And the 3 of us can take over the day-to-day operations," Michael added. "We're ready for it." "Are you sure?" Rebecca asked. "It's a huge responsibility." "Mom, you've prepared us our whole lives for this," Gabriel replied. "We've been part of every major decision. We know all the processes, and most importantly, we share the same values. Besides," Emily added, "it's only natural for each generation to take the lead at some point, and you'll always be here to guide us when we need it." The children's proposal made Richard and Rebecca reflect on the journey they had taken. They had truly dedicated over 15 years to building and solidifying the project. Maybe it was time to expand their impact beyond local boundaries. "You know what?" Richard finally said. "You're right. It's time to multiply our impact instead of just maintaining it. And it would be interesting to explore other cultures and see how our model adapts in different contexts," Rebecca added. "So it's decided?" Gabriel asked hopefully. "It's decided," Rebecca confirmed. "You'll take over operations and we'll take on the mission of teaching and inspiring other projects. But with one condition," Richard added, "weekly family. Meetings for strategic alignment. A family that works together, decides together." "Agreed," the 3 children said in unison. In the following months, the transition was gradual and natural. Michael took over the general management of the company. Emily became responsible for product development and sustainability, and Gabriel, though still studying, took charge of coordinating educational programs and community development initiatives. Freed from daily operational responsibilities, Richard and Rebecca began traveling across the United States, visiting communities interested in creating their own workshops, giving lectures at universities, and consulting with other business owners who wanted to develop socially impactful businesses. "For you know what amazes me most about these trips?" Rebecca remarked after a week visiting projects in the South. "What?" "How our story resonates with people from completely different backgrounds. Yesterday we spoke with a fishermen's cooperative that wants to create a seafood products workshop, and they completely understood our philosophy of extended family and mutual growth. It's because fundamental human values are universal," Richard observed. "Respect, love, opportunities to grow. Everyone wants that, no matter where they live or their socio-economic situation. And it's rewarding to see our model work in contexts very different from our original one." During one of these trips, they received a call that made them especially proud. "Dad, Mum," Gabriel said over the phone, "I have good news." "What news?" Richard asked. "Remember that 16-year-old girl who started in our program 3 months ago? Bethany, the one from a very underprivileged family?" "I remember. The girl with an incredible talent for embroidery," Rebecca replied. "She just won a full scholarship to a technical school for textile design. And more, a company in New York City offered her a paid internship during her studies." "Gabriel, that's wonderful," Rebecca celebrated. "But you know what's even better? She said once she finishes her course, she wants to come back here and open her own branch of the workshop in her neighborhood." "That's exactly what we've always dreamed of," Richard said emotionally, "creating opportunities that multiply." "And there's more," Gabriel continued excitedly. She's already identified 5 other young women in her community who have talents that could be developed. She's planning a full social transformation project for the neighborhood where she lives." "At 16?" Rebecca asked, impressed. "At 16, just like you've always said. Age doesn't matter when someone has vision and determination." After hanging up the phone, Richard and Rebecca sat in silence for a few minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what they had created. "Rebecca," Richard finally said, "do you realize we've created something that will keep growing and multiplying long after we're gone?" "I do. And it moves me to think of how many lives will be changed by people we don't even know, but who were inspired by something that started in my little kitchen 15 years ago. When you invited me to dinner that night, did you have any idea this could happen?" "None. I just wanted to get to know the father of the children I was caring for better." Rebecca laughed. "And you? When you accepted the invitation, did you imagine your life would change completely?" "Not in my wildest dreams. I thought it would just be a polite dinner with my children's nanny." And it turned out to be the beginning of the biggest transformation of our lives, and of many other lives too. 20 years after that first dinner, the network of workshops created by the Thompson-Davis family had spread across the country and inspired similar projects in other nations. Michael had married an architect, specializing in sustainable construction, and together they developed community spaces for the workshops. Emily had married a social educator, and they worked on creating educational curricula that integrated entrepreneurship, sustainability, and social responsibility. Gabriel, at 23, had become one of the youngest social business leaders in the country, but kept his feet on the ground and his family values as his moral compass. "Dad, Mom," he said during one of their weekly family meetings, "I want to share a special project with you." "What project?" Rebecca asked. "I'm writing a book about our story, not just our family's story, but the methodology. We developed the principles that guide us, the lessons we've learned." "A book?" Richard seemed surprised. "Yes, I think it's time to organize everything we've learned and make it available to people who want to create similar projects, but don't know where to start." "That's an excellent idea," Emily supported. "How many times have we gotten emails from people asking for guidance on how to begin?" "Hundreds," Michael confirmed. "A book would be a way to democratize access to our knowledge." "And what would be the main focus?" Rebecca asked, intrigued. 3 aspects, Gabriel explained. First, how to build businesses that are both profitable and socially responsible. Second, how to create families that work together while maintaining healthy relationships. Third, how to develop communities based on values of mutual respect and collective growth. Basically everything you taught us, but organized so others can apply it, Emily summarized. Exactly. And I want to dedicate the book to both of you, who had the courage to turn a simple dinner into a life revolution. Richard and Rebecca exchanged glances, moved by their youngest son's proposal. Gabriel, Rebecca said, we're honored that you want to tell our story. But remember, it's not just our story. It's the story of everyone who joined this journey. That's why the title I chose is A Table for All, How One Family Built Community, Gabriel revealed. Perfect, Richard approved. It represents exactly what we've always believed, that a true family is one that has room for everyone who shares the same values. 6 months later, Gabriel's book was launched in a ceremony at the original workshop, attended by hundreds of people who had been impacted by the project over the years. Junior, now the director of a network of 15 workshops specializing in urban art, gave the opening speech. Mrs. Jenkins, at 78 years old and still active as a senior advisor from WOW, the company offered the Thanksgiving prayer. When I look at all this, Mrs. Jenkins said to the gathered crowd, I see proof that God works through ordinary people who make extraordinary choices based on love. Richard and Rebecca weren't heroes when they first met. They were just people trying to do their best with the circumstances they had. But when they chose to prioritize love over fear, family over individualism, purpose over profit, they created something that transformed hundreds of lives. And the most beautiful part is that this can be replicated by anyone, anywhere, who is willing to make the same choices rooted in love and respect for others. The launch event was broadcast live to all branches of the workshop network, creating a moment of collective celebration that included thousands of people across the United States. Rebecca, Richard whispered during the event, do you have any idea how big what we've created is? I do, and I'm still processing it. She smiled. Sometimes it feels surreal that all of this started with a dinner invitation. It didn't start with the dinner invitation, Michael interjected, having overheard the conversation. It started with your decision to treat each other like family from day one. Michael's right, Emily agreed. The dinner was just the first moment you formalized what already existed, the desire to create genuine connections. And it was the first of many courageous decisions, Gabriel added. Deciding to fall in love, deciding to get married, deciding to create the workshop, deciding to include us in every major choice, deciding to expand to help other communities. Each decision opened doors to possibilities you never imagined existed, Michael finished. That night, after all the guests had left and the family was gathered on the porch of their home, Richard shared one final reflection. Do you know what the most incredible part of this whole journey is? What? Everyone asked. It wasn't just the business success or the social impact or even the transformation of our own lives. It was discovering that it's possible to live in a way completely different from what society teaches. How so? Gabriel asked. Society teaches that success is individual, that family and work are separate, that profit and social purpose are incompatible. We proved that you can do the exact opposite and be even more successful in every way. And happier, Rebecca added. I don't know any family happier than ours. Or more united, Emily observed. Or with more purpose, Michael added. And do you know why we achieved this? Gabriel asked rhetorically. Because from the beginning, we treated love as a verb, not a noun. Love as a daily choice, not a fleeting feeling. The 23-year-old's observation showed he had truly absorbed the essence of everything the family had built. Gabriel, Rebecca said proudly, you just perfectly summed up the philosophy it took us 20 years to develop. I learned from the masters, he smiled. And now you'll teach others, Richard said, through the book, the talks, the new projects you'll develop. We will all teach, Gabriel corrected, because this was never one person's project. It was always a family project, and it always will be. As he watched his family gathered on the porch, discussing the future with the same ease as they might plan the evening's dinner menu, Richard remembered the lonely, lost man he had been 20 years earlier. A man who worked 14-hour days to avoid facing the emptiness of his own life, who could barely hold a conversation with his own children, who believed success was measured solely by bank balances. Then he looked around at the reality surrounding him, an extraordinary wife who had become his partner in every aspect of life, children who were his closest friends and colleagues, a company that generated significant profit while transforming lives, and an extended community of hundreds who considered themselves family. All of it had begun with a simple dinner invitation, an invitation extended by a humble woman who wanted to get to know the father of the children she cared for. Woman who prepared a meal with simple ingredients, but seasoned with care and attention. And when he had wept upon discovering that Rebecca had sacrificed to impress him, buying expensive ingredients with the little money she had, embroidering special napkins, spending hours to make everything perfect, he had realized he was standing before something precious, someone who valued him not for what he had, but for who he was. That moment of discovery had planted the seed of a transformation that would change not only their lives, but the lives of thousands. Now, 20 years later, Richard finally fully understood what Catherine had tried to teach him in her final months, that true success is not measured by what we accumulate, but by what we build with and for others, and that true love, whether romantic, familial, or communal, is not a feeling that happens to us, but a decision we make every day to prioritize the well-being of others alongside our own. "Thank you," he said aloud, surprising the family. "Thank you for what, Dad?" Emily asked. "For teaching me that family isn't something we inherit, but something we build. For showing me that work can be purpose. For proving it's possible to live with love, integrity, and meaning every single day." "Dad," Michael said affectionately, "thank you for having the courage to change, for accepting that love is more important than pride, that family is more important than work, and that purpose is more important than profit. And thank you for including us in this whole journey from the beginning," Gabriel added, "for treating us as partners, not just as children. And thank you for letting me be part of this extraordinary family," Rebecca said, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "For showing me I was far more capable than I ever imagined, and that I deserved love and respect just as much as anyone." At that moment, with the family gathered on the porch under the starry sky, Richard realized he had found exactly what Catherine had wished for him in her final days, a new chance to love and be loved, a family bound by choice and not just blood, and a purpose that gave meaning to each day. The man who had accepted a simple dinner invitation 20 years earlier no longer existed. In his place stood someone who had learned that true wealth is measured in relationships, that true success is measured in transformed lives, and that true happiness is found not in what we achieve for ourselves, but in what we build for and with others. And all of it had begun with a simple woman who prepared a special dinner to impress a man she was learning to love. A dinner that became the first of thousands of shared meals, the first of thousands of conversations that built a family, the first of thousands of moments that proved true love has the power to transform not just people, but entire communities. When they finally went to sleep that night, Richard lay beside Rebecca and whispered, "Thank you for that dinner." "Thank you for accepting the invitation," she whispered back. "Best decision of my life." "Our life," she corrected. "The best decision of our life." And both drifted off to sleep in peace, knowing they had found exactly where they were meant to be, at home, with the family they chose to build together, surrounded by the love they chose to nurture every day, wrapped in the purpose they chose to leave as a legacy for future generations. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of the story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave your heartfelt words in the comments. Do you think Richard made the right choice by accepting that dinner invitation? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories.